Management Council. The time is 6:06 p.m. And this meeting is being held via Zoom platform. For council members, I'll do a roll call when I call your name. If you can unmute and just indicate you're here. Starting with myself, Jennifer Cervenka, Chair. Vice Chair Ray Koya.
Ray Koya is here.
Thank you. Member Don Gomez.
Don Gomez, present.
Member Mike Hudner.
Hudner, present.
Member Jerry Sahajian. I thought I saw.
Here.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Jerry. Member Patricia Reynolds.
Reynolds, present.
Member Ron Gagnon.
Ron Gagnon here.
Thank you. And member Joy Montanaro.
Joy Montanaro here.
Thank you. From staff, we have our Executive Director, Jeff Willis.
Here, Madam Chair.
Our Acting Deputy Director, Jim Boyd.
Jim Boyd, present, Madam Chair.
Are you still acting or are you official?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Acting.
All right. You're official in my mind. We have Tracy Sylvia with us.
Here, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Lisa Turner, our recording secretary.
Present, Madam Chair.
We have John Longo, our legal counsel.
Yes.
Laura Dwyer, public outreach.
Here, Madam Chair.
Ryan Moore, our moderator.
Here, Madam Chair.
Okay, and I am looking for our court reporter.
Oh,
Do we have one?
she's not online yet.
We are recording this meeting, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Okay, do we also have a court reporter or no?
I'm going to get in touch with Becky right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't see her.
Mr. Longo, due to the fact that we are recording via Zoom, is it okay to proceed or shall we wait?
It's okay to proceed.
Okay. All right, starting with the, well, actually, I'll turn it over to Mr. Moore, who's going to do your Zoom presentation for the benefit of the audience and the rules of how this meeting will work. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Council Virtual Subcommittee, January 12th, 2021, conducted in accordance with the Executive Order 20-46, 107 Supplemental Emergency Declaration, Extension of Executive Orders. If you're having problems with your computer audio, please use this number for the meeting. I have posted the local and the toll-free number. The meeting ID and password will also be in the chat box. A note to meeting participants, please be advised this is an online meeting, including all audio, video, and names and comments will be visible in the chat box and are being recorded. All members of the public who wish to comment during these proceedings must correctly identify themselves before proceeding. Council members, applicants, and CRMC staff, turn video on. Do not use phone and computer audio at the same time. Raise your hand or use the raise hand button to be recognized by the chair. Identify yourself by full name. Use the chat box to communicate any issues with audio or video to the moderator. Members of the public, please keep your video off. Mute your microphone when not speaking. Use the raise hand function to be recognized by the chair. Wait to be recognized by the chair and unmuted by the moderator to speak. Identify yourself by full name. For those on phone, please press *9 to use the raise hand function. When recognized, then identify yourself by name. Use the chat box to communicate any issues with audio or video, and Q&A will be disabled for this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Okay, we're going to start with the approval of, we have two draft minutes, the first being from December 8th, 2020. Can I have a motion to approve those?
So move, Madam Chair. Jerry Sahazian.
Thank you, Jerry. Is there a second?
Second, Ron Gagnon.
Thank you, Mr. Gagnon. Any discussion? Okay, if not, I'm going to do a roll call. Vice Chair Ray Koya,
Ray Coy votes aye.
Member Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Jerry Sahazian,
Aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Patricia Reynolds, aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Joy Montanaro,
Joy Montanaro, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The December 8th, 2020 meeting minutes are approved. The next set of minutes, December 29th, 2020. I was not present for that, so I will be abstaining from this vote, but I'll ask if there's a motion to approve.
Madam Chair, Ray Coy moves to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Koya. Is there a second?
Don Gomez, second.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Any discussion? Okay, none. I'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Ray Koya,
Ray Coy votes aye.
Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Jerry Sahazian,
Aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Reynolds, aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Joy Montanaro,
Joy Montanaro, aye.
and myself again that I'm abstaining from this. The minutes for December 29, 2020 are approved. Moving on to subcommittee reports. Mr. Boyd, do you have any for us?
No subcommittee reports, Madam Chair.
We'll hear from you later, right? Okay. Right. Moving on to Mr. Willis. Do you have anything you'd like to report out?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of items I'd like to talk about. First is the Jamestown Boatyard. We issued the assent for the Jamestown Boatyard, where initially the plan was to bring the decision of that action of the councils to the council as a result of your October 20th meeting. If you remember, the council voted 6-2 to approve the application there. A number of issues beyond our control presented themselves, and it resulted in the fact that the decision wasn't available to be written until the end of December, and the council had already recessed for the year at that point. Based on that 2-month passage of time from the vote, coupled with the fact that the council wouldn't be meeting again until tonight, I issued the assent and the decision as we customarily would. So I just wanted to bring you up to speed on that particular issue. I also have let you know about our negotiations on the South Fork Wind project, and those are continuing. We basically took a pause over the holiday, and we reconvened our one-on-one negotiations with the fishermen as well as the developer. We started them up again this week, so I'll have more to report to you on that at the next meeting. And this kind of goes, this next item goes back to your comment with Jim earlier. We had gotten the administration to release 2 positions that have been vacant here at the CRMC for quite some time. One, the deputy director position, and the other, an engineering tech position, one of our regulatory positions. And we were able to put them out to notice in December and over the holidays. And for the deputy director position, I am actually this week holding interviews for that position. I started yesterday, I'll finish on Friday. I hope to have a decision on that by an approved decision by administration by that next week. And then right after that, on the heels of that, we will hold interviews for the engineering tech position, because as I mentioned, it's a regulatory position. And right now the applications are piling up. As you can imagine, as I've mentioned before, the backlog of applications are ticking upwards, and with staff not being available through retirements and now taking the time it took to get this position approved to be hired. We want to get that engineering tech on board as soon as possible. So we'll be holding those interviews in the next couple of weeks. Then lastly, I just wanted to bring the council up to speed on permit streamlining effort that we're working on. I've mentioned in the past some of the things I'd like to do to look at the application workload here and some of the activities that are not necessarily an impact to the coastal resources. And one of those avenues is to work with agencies that do work all the time in the coastal zone, and yet they're performing activities that really don't have a big impact on our coastal resources. And I'm particularly talking about DOT. They do road resurfacing projects. They do a lot of landscaping projects. They do other types of work that they need a permit from the CRMC for. And it's not an issue to get one. It's just a time frame issue. And I feel that if we put together an MOU with the Department of Transportation, like we have one already with DEM, we can help move both agencies forward along those de minimis type activities that normally they would need a permit to get from us. So just wanted to bring you up to speed on those issues, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Willis?
Just one, Madam Chair.
Mr. Gomez?
Yeah, is there any status update on that Block Island cable, or is
Oh.
that?
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Yes, there is. It's actually on schedule and doing quite well. They have laid the conduit for the cable itself that has already been, they did the horizontal directional drilling. They put the conduit through that. So they're basically just buttoning up that work right now. And the next step is to lay the conduit and make the connections at both ends. So they have told us that they are on schedule for a spring completion date. So that is going well. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me about that.
Any other questions? Mr. Willer, just a question about other positions at the agency. So, obviously deputy director is pretty important, and you have your second position. There are others, correct? But it's just a matter of getting this freeze.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Absolutely, and we will, unfortunately, we will be experiencing more retirements in this particular calendar year. So we will be continuing the process of bringing new staff on board.
Okay. All right, moving on in our agenda to two requests for extension for fourth and final approval. The first one is A 2007-04-157, Walter Bozzi. Is it Bozzi? And then the second one is going to be A 2007-04-158, Ralph Bozzi. I know those parcels are together. I don't know if we consider them separately or together, Mr. Willis.
They're two separate applications, Madam Chair. I know
Okay.
that the applicants are brothers.
Okay.
If you want to hold them together, that would be fine, because the reason that they are in front of the council is because it's their fourth request. And per the management procedures, that decision has to be made in front of the council.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked back at the history, it seemed to be the same history from the 2007 ascents.
Mhm.
But if we need to consider them separately, that's okay. I just want it to be efficient.
I don't see the issue with them being held together, Madam Chair, as
Okay,
long as the council recognizes that we're looking at two separate applications that come tomorrow, we can make sure administratively we handle them appropriately.
okay. And it looks like both of the applications originally came before the council in 2007. They're issued assents for 3-bedroom homes with an on-site wastewater treatment system and permeable driveway. And then you have the tolling period, which was
Yes.
from 2009 to 17.
16, yeah.
And then it came out of that tolling period. And then there were 3 administrative extensions as is permitted under the management procedures for the fourth and final, unless it's a public infrastructure project, but this would be the final extension. The applicant has to come before the council.
That's correct.
And I saw the 2 requests for extension. Did you want to say anything more on these before we invite the applicants?
No, Madam Chair, I just wanted to, and we have already touched on the procedural nature of why it's in front of the council.
Okay. All right, so I would ask if the applicants for these 2 requests would turn on their videos. It looks like I have one. And we need that, Mr. Moore, we need those people unmuted as well.
Madam Chair, are you going to want me to swear them in?
If they're not council, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Moore, did you give the ability to unmute?
I'm looking.
Okay.
They should be unmuted now.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
my name is Walter Bozy. And I'm
Okay,
addressing,
I'm looking for you.
can you find?
On your video? Okay. great.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. So I could
yeah,
look
thank
at
you.
someone, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Walter Bozy and I'm addressing the Madam Chair and the rest of the council.
Okay.
My brother and I are
You
here.
know, sir, let me just- let me just
One
swear you in.
minute, 1 minute. We're gonna have you sworn in by our legal
Okay.
counsel. Okay.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you are Walter Bozzi,
Yes, I am.
B-O-Z-Z-I?
That is correct.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my brother and I are here. He's the one that usually does most of the things on the lot. We put together a little statement. If I can read it, it'll be consistent from my brother and myself. So we acknowledge that this is the last 1-year extension for each of the 2 CRMC assets. We would like to have the last extension to utilize the survey and engineering costs we have incurred in obtaining the CRMC asset. My brother and I are going to look to pooling our financial resources, and if we can't afford to build the houses, then it will be our intention to quickly sell both properties. There are a couple of interested buyers in case we do not do that. We will fully disclose to buyers that this is the last 1-year extension, and when expires, a new CRMC application is required. If granted, we will record the CRMC extension in the land evidence records in Warwick City Hall. Thank you.
And as you might know, the council has the ability to grant this 4th and final extension for good cause. So could you, I know there was some language in your requests about, COVID and the pandemic.
Yes.
Can you speak to that matter, to the good cause, so we can hear from you on it?
Yes. In the past, unfortunately, we've had some setbacks with my parents. I had to take care of my parents. That's in the past. Unfortunately, my brother and my brother's the one that usually takes care of everything with the lands. Unfortunately, I had a problem. I was out of work for months. And the year before, I had an accident. The year before that, my brother had a problem. He had a detached retina, which reoccurred, which set him back even more months. And he hurt his arm, and he had to go for surgery for his arm. It does seem crazy, but it's been one thing after another. And now here we are in our 70s, early 70s, and now we want to come to a conclusion on this. The land has been in the family for quite a long time. So this is our last hurrah, and we would appreciate and would thank you if you can consider extending this for 1 more year for us for the last hurrah. So I thank you again, Madam Chairman, and the rest of the council.
Just does anyone have questions for Mr. Bosey? What he just said, the process of granting an extension? Okay, if none, I just have a question for Mr. Willis. Mr. Willis, our management procedures say we can grant this so long as nothing's changed in the CRMP that would require a variance or a special exception. I'm assuming because it was granted, last year, that there probably is no change, but I wanted to ask the question and hear it.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair. No, since the last extension that was granted and the ones prior, there's been no regulatory changes for that area where these properties exist. So you are correct. Everything has been the same since the last time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who is in the audience that would like to comment upon the request for an extension? And if you do, would you please raise your hand? Mr. Moore, I don't know if I would see that or only you would see it. Do you see anyone?
You should see it as well, but no, there are no hands up.
Okay, all right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kendra Beaver would like to comment.
Okay. I don't see Kendra. Kendra, if you're out there, can you put on your, hello. Hi, Kendra.
Hi.
Would you like to
I
comment?
would. I'm Kendra Beaver. I'm commenting on behalf of Save the Bay. And I just want to make sure that at least last year, if not this year, there has been a determination by someone with expertise that there's been no change in the environmental conditions on site. The assent was issued in 2007. As you know, this is a very vulnerable area with routine street flooding. And we have a lot more information about sea level rise and erosion and sea level rise affecting marshes since the application was granted in 2007. So I'm not questioning the good cause, and I'm sorry for all their troubles. But I just want to make sure that there has been a determination that there's been no substantial change in the environmental conditions on the site.
That's a good question. Mr. Willis, I'm assuming you can address that?
I can. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Kendra, yes, for every extension request, we send staff out to the site to make sure that those environmental conditions have not changed significantly, where we would have an issue with extending the permit for what it was originally permitted for. So this was no different. We sent staff out to these two sites ahead of putting these matters in front of the council to ask that exact same question. So the environmental conditions at the site, according to staff, are similar to what they have been.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't see that in the report, so thank you.
Yep. And Madam Chair, that's a fair comment by Kendra. The report for these two applications would not have that level of detail, but as a matter of course, for every extension request we get, administrative or ones that come in front of the council, it is our practice to send staff out to the site before we make a decision on that.
Okay, makes sense. And just to go back to Mr. Bosey, you have started some construction, the OWTSs are in for the lots?
Yes.
Yes, my brother's done all that. If you want, have any more questions, I will just turn it over to him. He can answer most of the questions.
No, I just wanted
Yeah,
to
okay.
understand that but construction has begun on the
Yeah.
project. It just is not complete.
Right.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if his brother's here,
Yes.
could we have him appear and say he agrees with, I'll swear him in and he can agree with what his brother has said?
Sure.
Sir, could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
And you're Ralph Bozzi, B-O-Z-Z-I?
Yes,
And you can put your hand down. You heard what your brother said?
yes, I do.
Do you agree with it?
I agree.
And it
100%.
was all true and accurate? It was all true and accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Is that good, Mr. Longo?
That's sufficient, Your Honor. Yes.
Yeah, I agree,
Madam Chair.
because there were some references to the brother and we couldn't see him, so thank you. All right, any other questions for the Boseys or for Mr. Willis on these two requests for the fourth and final extension? And the,
Madam Chair, I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
okay,
So,
go
you know,
ahead.
it saddens me that these people have owned this property for 40 years. They have all the pertinent permits. They almost have to kneel before us to secure an extension for a year, especially the last year with COVID and extenuating circumstances. So when you think it's appropriate, I would like to make a motion to grant an extension for both properties.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sahajian. I think we're done with questions. Mr. Gomez, did you have one? You unmuted.
No, I do
All
not.
right. Okay, so
agree with
then I
you.
will close the public hearing portion of this, and I will turn it over to you, Jerry, so you can make your motion.
I move that we grant a 1-year extension for both applications.
And is there a second?
Second, Don Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Any discussion? All right,
Madam Chair, I'd like to
Yes.
second the sentiment that Jerry Sahajian raised. I think is very correct. It's a very complicated process for people. I mean, they're getting old in front of their property, as I guess we all are. But it'd be nice to do something.
sure. Yeah, I mean, we wish them luck and we wish them health also.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, all right, I'm gonna do a roll call. Starting with Vice Chair Ray Koya.
Madam Chair, I vote aye, but I just want to say that I do agree with Jerry and Michael what they said. However, you know, we do have a procedure that they have to follow, but based on everything that's presented in the application, I feel that good cause is made. So for that reason, I certainly would grant it. And so I vote aye.
Thank you, Mr. Koya. Mr. Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye, and good luck to the applicants.
Mr. Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Mr. Sahajian,
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds,
Trisha Reynolds, aye.
Mr. Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Ms. Montanaro,
Joy Montanaro, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The motion carries the request for a 1-year extension to, is it December 29th, 2021? Mr.
Madam
Willis?
Chair, I have to say something.
Yes,
You said December. That's really not fair because sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 weeks to get something from us. I think it should be a year from today.
that's what I was asking Mr. Willis about.
okay.
I thought I saw that it was to the end of December. I don't know if we have discretion to grant it, to take into consideration that they couldn't get in front of us earlier.
Madam Chair, I think two things. One, normally extension requests are based on the expiration date of the original assent. So that would be where the December 29 date comes in. However, the council has the legislative ability to modify any assent that comes in front of it. So if Mr. Longo agrees with me, I would think if the council says 1 year from today, then that would be the 1-year extension period.
Mr. Longo?
Yes, so the applicant applied for it in time, so it's fine to go 1 year from today.
Okay, so that's just a clarification of the motion that we just voted on, that it's 1 year, whatever that date is,
Yep.
you know, approximately January 12th, 2022. Okay, thank you to you two, and good luck with your project, and I hope you stay healthy. All right, Moving on to application, which has been out to notice and is before the full council for decision, 2018-11-092, Paul and Tara Santa Barbara. And I believe we have Miss Sylvia, who is going to present the staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me start first with a brief summary of the application and then where we left off, since it was sort of a disjunct process in this one. The applicant is looking for a dock permit, fixed pier ramp float. It's on Great Island in Narragansett, and it's directly abutting a town right of way. The facility is 37 feet seaward of mean low water, but it does require a 19-foot property line setback variance to the town right of way, which can only be granted by the council. And there were also numerous objections, as well as the town objected during the process. So the application was written up, sent to the council, and we started our hearing about a year or so ago. At that hearing, the quorum, I believe, was about to be lost, so options were limited. It was going to continue to a next meeting, and then COVID occurred. But the objectors started to give some testimony, and were about to offer various proposals that they would like to see for a dock option out here. And the council directed that they all get together, including the town, and have a meeting, discuss it, see if they could work something out before the next meeting. Well, here we are a year later. Essentially, the biggest issues in this application, staff recommended deferral for the objections, but there's no technical objection to this. There are, in theory, about 19 outhauls located in the waters of the town right of way, 3 directly in it, and about 16 further west, southwest of that area. And that also restricts the ability, to navigate that area. There is very little room to the property to the east. They got a sign off from that abutter who actually testified at the last hearing. So they've already gotten a sign off there. They have, in staff's opinion, tried to basically center the proposal, best of both worlds. Most of the objections were due to use, crowding, etc. The town offered testimony at the last meeting, objecting to it and offering their version of a different proposal that would allow a dock out there. And then there's also those outhauls that are existing don't have permits. So staff recommended in the staff report several scenarios to resolve this. And I still stand by most of those today. Since the last meeting, the correspondence that we've gotten from the abutters, the town, and or the applicant indicate that they did have some meetings, but they were not able to agree on any proposed resolution. Most of them involved either limiting the size of the vessel, the location of the vessel to one side of the structure, reducing the float size, moving the structure inland a little bit, which would also create other variances. The applicant's engineer provided information as to why they didn't agree with it. The objectors group then responded to that. I spoke with the town recently. They still stand by their objection. So we're basically back to where we started, where the applicant's plan is what they want to go forward with. It requires that variance. Staff has no objection to any of the proposals that I had kind of put out there in the earlier staff report. I think they're on page 8. I can check on that, of the agenda packet, where the council could grant a slight water depth variance. They could grant an additional setback variance to the tailors to the east. They could grant a different setback variance to the town right of way. There's various options here that could satisfy, but they would all require some form of variance. And as well, it was also brought to staff's attention that the 3 outhauls located within the actual right of way have been removed. I got an email in July, which should be in the agenda packet, that they were removed by the objector group, I believe. But we still need permitting for the remaining outhauls, which is a town issue. And hopefully that will free up some space out there for everybody.
Ms. Sylvia, you just reviewed the variance criteria for just the setback, or what do you call it? Property line set?
Property line setback.
Yeah, property line setback. That's the only variance that you reviewed and have an opinion on, right?
Correct. We did sort of make a comment in the staff report, and I've stated in several email correspondence to the various parties that I could support a slight water depth variance if that would, maybe the 19-foot property line variance gets reduced to, a 16-foot, and maybe they need an additional 2 feet variance on the other side, and we shorten it, and we need, 2 inches of water depth variance to get everybody satisfied. I could support any of those variances, a small amount, as long as I saw a plan that supported it.
Okay, but we don't have that plan?
The plan that was discussed at the last council meeting, and I believe was submitted to the council members, was passed out at the meeting, we all kind of looked at, was the objector group's plan. That doesn't entirely match the town's request of what they could live with. Though I do believe the town supported the objector group's consolidated options. That plan, from my understanding, has not changed since the last council meeting. So I don't have anything other than what the objectors want. The applicant themselves have not changed their design or requested additional variances.
Okay, but just your staff report with the recommendations, the different resolutions, that is only evaluating the applicant's plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
And requested variance. It's not looking at the objectors, not looking at the towns.
Correct. We didn't go into a detailed analysis of the various possible layouts.
Okay, I just, I was a little bit confused reading it. Now I'm confused listening to it. And I know you've been in the middle of it, so it's perfectly clear to you, but I just want to make sure that what I looked at as far as your review was the applicant's plan.
Correct.
Okay. And as you understand it, there has been no consensus on his plan as you've reviewed or any alternative plan.
Correct.
All
Correct.
three.
The engineer responded after the attorney for the applicant, the town, and the objectors group met. They responded with a rebuttal from their engineer saying why they didn't like those options and wanted to proceed with the current design.
Okay. Are there questions for Miss Sylvia? Council members have? Yes, Mr. Gomez.
Yeah, the whole resolution thing at the end of the, I guess that's the staff report. What is it, page 10, is it? And
Like it's 8.
yeah, I read it, page 7. You kind of went through those, but they're kind of confusing to me because it looks like some of those we don't have any control over. You indicated that 3 outhauls had been removed from the right of way. And there were other things in here that we might consider. But I'm not sure how we do it with this particular application. Some of them sound like suggestions rather than something that we can actually work on. So if you just expand a little bit on the resolutions, maybe the light bulb would go on.
Sure. I'm just, bear with me a minute. I'm trying to get that page back
7.
up. Page 7, right? So if we are looking at page 7 was how to handle the outhaul situation. And my comment on that, if we want to table that to the end of this meeting, whether the dock is approved or not, the outhauls out there are still an issue that could be addressed, and the page 7 resolutions can be more explored then, unless, I can go into them now. The resolutions on page 8 was sort of a summary of all of the issues. So if we take the outhauls out of the equation, other than the 3 which have been removed since the staff report was issued, then essentially the real issue is how which proposal do we want to issue a permit to, or not at all for the dock? Restricting the size of the vessel and its location were both suggested, but not required by our regulations. Reconfiguring the facility and the various options versus, that the town and the objectors asked for are also options. Any of which staff is hoping they would have worked out a resolution to this. All the other ones are related to really how to handle the outhaul situation, regardless of what happens with this dock decision.
Yeah. Okay, and it was page 8. I'm seeing a 7 over in the
just saw it.
corner. It confuses me. I guess I'm easily confused. I think that helps to some extent. So what you're also saying is that you suggested some options that we could use relative to the application, and the outhaul issues we should consider separately, I guess.
I think so. I think the outhauls were complicating the application because they were restricting the waterways available use for parties, but
I can remember this, but thank you. I think I got it now.
Just a question, and maybe this is better directed to Mr. Longo, but with respect to the outhaul situation and whether they need to be permitted or not, we don't do that in this application, correct? That's something separate. It complicates this, but we can't grant any relief. We don't have the parties before us.
so
this-
go ahead, John.
Yeah, the towns are allowed to permit outhauls under our plan, but they have to address them in their harbor management plan. And it's my understanding that these outhauls are not, they've been there for a while and the town hasn't tried to kick them out, but they haven't been in a approved harbor management plan that the CRMC has approved. They're not in a plan that the CRMC has ever approved. So they, legally, they don't have the same gravitas of if they were in an approved harbor management plan.
So it just goes to our consideration of them as conflicting uses.
Yes, it's a conflicting use that's being done without a permit
Okay.
Madam Chair.
from the
Yes,
from the
Mr. Willis.
council.
Actually, Ms. Sylvia bringing up the outhaul issue, Mr. Gomez asking that particular question, and what we've just heard from Mr. Longo and yourself, it would be definitely, it's part of the equation to figure out how we might want to review this particular application in front of the council. And the competing uses are always an issue when we look at applications. The fact that our understanding that this particular outhaul area has not been approved by the town of Narragansett through their harbor plan, like Mr. Longo said, that's the CRMC's basically delegation to a municipality to do so through their harbor plan, yet the other outhauls in the town have been so permitted, has complicated the matter for Ms. Sylvia as a reviewer. So I think Mr. Gomez touched on it. If we can talk to that issue at the end of our review of this application, and maybe I could ask the council to direct me to work with staff, to work with the town to get this resolved, get the outhaul issue in this area resolved with the direction from the council. I'd be more than happy to do that. But it's still part of the equation in our review of this application.
Madam Chair, can I say something?
Yes, Mr. Sage.
So I think we should isolate or separate the two issues. We have an application that's been in the system for 2 years. Because the town, right, or the abutters didn't appropriately or properly secure permits for their outhauls, right, shouldn't prevent the applicant from moving forward. It's two separate issues. I think we should focus on the application this evening that's already been delayed at least a year. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think the proper way to look at it is to understand that they're not permitted. They're being held up as a conflicting use yet they're not permitted. So that's something that we consider and we weigh. But I agree with you as far as figuring out what to do with it. I think that's separate and apart from processing this application.
But once again, we have to look at the variance criteria in the red book. And if the application meets the criteria in the red book, I don't think we should really hold it up because of conflicting uses. Because then apply the same criteria from the red book to the conflicting uses, becomes a moot point.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we would move on to the applicant?
Do we have precedents for dealing with non-sanctioned uses such as these outholes?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we do. If we have activities that have not been permitted yet, we are looking at an activity that, let's say for all intent and purposes, the council has no problem with its being located where it's proposed. We have the ability to allow that application to be approved, and then we would direct staff to go and have an enforcement action against that other activity that has not yet been gone through the regulatory process. So we are looking at a situation here where we have a right of way in between a dock and some unpermitted activities, but because of the tightness of the cove, those unpermitted activities may or may not have an issue with the siting of the dock. And that's part of Tracy's equation that she's been trying to get the applicant and the objectors to work on. The issue of the fact that they have not been permitted is a separate one and should be handled separately, and we can address that separately if the council directs me to do so. Even if you don't, I think I should anyway.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we should hear now from the applicant. Can the applicant or council raise your hand so we can have you present?
Madam Chair, my name is Christine DeBies. I'm here appearing on behalf of the applicant with Joe DeAngelis, who is on. I see him. I just think he needs to turn his video on.
Okay, and your counsel?
I am, that's correct.
All right, would you like, are you presenting?
No, I think I finally came on.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
loud and clear.
Very loud.
It took me a while. Madam Chair and members of the council, it is my pleasure to represent the Santa Barbara family this evening. For those of you who were present at the January 2020 hearing, my colleague, Elizabeth Noonan, represented the Santa Barbaras at that hearing. And unfortunately, she cannot be at two places at the same time. And she asked me to fill in for her this evening, and I'm happy to do so. I think listening to the comments of the various members of the council with respect to the issue of the right of the Santa Barbaras and versus the whatever rights the outhall owners have has been somewhat enlightening. On the one hand, we have a property owner that has certain rights, some of which are constitutional in nature, that allow him to wharf out so long as wharfing out is considered reasonable by the members of this council. Clearly, the staff report prepared by Tracy was very exhaustive, and I have to compliment it because I know she has spent considerable time and effort talking to Paul Santa Barbara, who is trying to achieve his lifelong dream of having a dock at his property. And then on the other hand, you've got the outhall owners. I don't know if any of them are the owners of headland. My sense is that they probably are not, and that's why they have outhauls, but because it allows them to gain access to that great highway of the nations. So it's an interesting case, and we intend to proceed on the basis of the application filed some years ago. Mr. Santa Barbara is on the Zoom and is available to answer any questions that any members may have. I intend to present one witness, CJ Doyle. She was not able to appear at the January hearing because of a family emergency. But for the benefit of those that were not at that hearing, Mr. Santa Barbara testified, and Jeff Balch, the property line surveyor, also testified. So we only have one witness to present, and when the time is appropriate, I would call CJ Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. As you heard, we were just talking about these resolution options. And I think I heard from you that you're proceeding on your application, but would you address if you have or would consider any of those options listed on page 8 of our packet?
As I mentioned, I have not gotten involved in this case from its beginning. In fact, I got called in by Beth at the end of last week, and she said, can you help me out? But I am aware of looking at the file that CJ Doyle sent a letter on March 3rd, 2020 to Tracy outlining the engineering concerns with respect to the suggestions being made. And what I would propose to do is ask CJ during her testimony to go through those options and the reason why there is a conflict and an agreement cannot be reached in terms of what is being proposed.
Okay, that makes sense. Any other questions for Mr. DeAngelis before he presents his first witness? Okay, if not, then I think we'll go to your first witness, Mr. Longo. Are you gonna swear her in?
Ms. Doyle, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And you're a professional civil engineer?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple of questions to qualify you, CJ. Would you state for the record what your educational background is?
I have a bachelor's degree from Brown University in civil engineering and a master's degree in environmental engineering from Worcester Polytech.
And you are a professional engineer?
Yes, I am, state of Rhode Island.
And so certified for how long?
Since 1987,
And
a while ago.
And have you appeared as an expert witness before the Coastal Resources Management Council in the past?
Yes, I have several times.
On approximately how many occasions would you say you've testified in that capacity?
7 or 8.
Madam Chair, CJ Doyle has an extensive resume that I've provided to Lisa Turner today, but I would request that she be classified as an expert witness in her field of professional engineering.
Mr. Longo, Mr. DeSisto usually has a position on this, on the qualification of experts. Do you want to stand in his shoes and express it?
Yes, she's been accepted in the past, and she's got the experience and the resume and the professional license from the state to be qualified as an expert in civil engineering.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Do we need to vote on that?
Typically, the chair just recognizes it, and if any of the members object, they can call for a vote.
Okay, I think it's an appropriate qualification. Any other council members want to speak to this? Okay, she's so qualified. Please proceed.
CJ, how long have you represented the Santa Barbara family?
I began the project in 2018, so it's headed toward 3 years.
Yeah. If you would briefly, would you describe the project as being proposed by the Santa Barbara family?
Okay, the Santa Barbaras have a pie-shaped lot such that the property line extensions converge in a point out in the water. So it compounds the problem with trying to design a dock for the property and maintain the 25 feet to the property line extensions for both of the abutters. The site is to the north of Seacrest Drive, right at the intersection with Abalone Road. To the east is an undeveloped residential lot. To the west is the town right-of-way, which is 40 feet wide. And what we sought to do was center the dock within this pie-shaped configuration so that we maximize the distances to either property line extension. There's absolutely no way we could meet the 25 feet to both property line extensions. We were able to provide a minimum of 1.7 feet of water depth at the seaward end of the float. So we meet that criteria. The existing coastal feature is a man-made seawall, so pretty distinctive. And I think that's a quick synopsis of what we're looking for.
Thank you. The abutter to the east, I believe it's the Taylor family.
Correct.
They provided a significant agreement in terms of the 25-foot offset.
Yes, I believe that we are 6 feet from their property line extension, so that would have been a 19-foot variance on that side.
And the applicants are seeking a similar 19-foot variance on the western side.
Correct, on the next to the town of Narragansett property. Correct.
And based upon your working with CRMC staff on this application, would this application have been an administrative application not requiring council approval had the town agreed to that 19-foot variance?
That is correct.
Okay. So as you've probably heard, the members of the council have some questions with respect to some of the proposals made by the objectors in terms, and the town, in terms of modification of the dock. And I understand that you sent a letter to Tracy Sylvia on March 3rd, 2020. And I would ask you to review your opinions and comments with respect to the issues raised by the objectors.
Okay. The proposal by the abutters and objectors was that the dock be shortened in length and be moved a few feet to the east. So the distance was 4 feet to the east toward Mr. Taylor's property, and shortening the dock by 5 feet, allowing the same float size. So just shortening it 5 feet closer to the shore. So by doing that, by shortening it up and shifting it to the east, it's minimizing the water depth. The water depth is going to be 1.4 feet on the seaward end compared to the 1.7 feet that we have as it's shown on the proposal. So we would need that variance. My client is not happy about minimizing the water depth. That doesn't seem to work for him. Let's see.
If I could interject for a second, CJ, does CRMC have any standards in terms of the minimum water depth that you require for a dock?
1.5 feet on the seaward end of the float is the minimum depth at mean low water.
Okay. Please continue.
Okay. Let's see. We had a sign off from Mr. Taylor for our proposal with the 19-foot variance. And our understanding at the time that this proposal came out to go closer to his property line is that he would not approve that change to the letter he had previously given us for the application. So he was not in favor of moving the dock closer to his property than what was shown on our proposal.
And did I hear you say that the Taylor property is unimproved at the present time? Is that what you
That's
said?
correct. I don't believe there's a house or a dock on it at all. It's unimproved.
So at some time in the future, it is likely that someone will build a house there.
That is correct. I would have to believe that.
And whoever builds a house there may want to also have a dock there. Is that correct?
Certainly, he has about 60 feet of water frontage.
Okay. Please continue with your comments relating to the objectives proposals.
Okay, and then the next item was the outhaul poles. Our understanding is that at least 2 of them were removed totally, the 2 that were closest to our proposed dock. The third one was either removed or relocated outside of the town right-of-way. So that 40-foot right-of-way now is clear. When we originally submitted our proposal, our distance to the closest outhaul from the float was 28.9 feet. So now I have in excess of 46 feet to the closest outhaul pole, because they've cleared up the 40-foot. So that was a dramatic change in terms of what we were looking at as far as design parameters versus the original submittal, when we didn't know that those outhaul poles were actually within the town right-of-way. They were not located till after our initial submittal to CRMC. And again, just reiterating that we sought to maximize the distance to both butters property line extensions, centering up the dock so that we've maximized the distances to both sets of abutters, and don't really see the advantage to moving a few feet and minimizing the water depth at this point for the dock proposal.
Okay, I'd like to ask you, moving on, I'm sure some of the members of the council may have some questions for you, but you're familiar with the variance criteria under 1.1.7 of the Red Book?
Yes, I think that it's actually been renumbered under the, is it 1.7? Yes, okay. When it was submitted, it was under the 300 point whatever scenario section.
We're all more familiar with those.
Yes.
In your opinion, based upon your education and experience as a professional engineer in your practice before the Coastal Resources Management Council, does this proposal by the applicant conform with the applicable goals and policies of the CRMC?
I believe it does. The only impacts to the actual water environment will be there are 10 piles that will need to go in to support the dock. That'll be a minimal impact to the waters, and it'll be temporary until the piles are in place. We are meeting all of the design requirements, with the exception of the distances to the property line extensions. We have the water depth. We stay well within the maximum length of dock that's allowed. The actual use of the dock will not impair waters more than they already are. It's a fairly well-trafficked area. In my opinion, this proposal as it's presented will not impact negatively the environmental aspects of the area.
Looking at variance criteria 3, as you mentioned in your earlier testimony, this is a pie-shaped lot, and utilizing the property line extension as set forth by CRMC, is it your opinion that due to this condition, the standards, especially with regard to setback, cannot be met?
That is correct. It's unique to the lot. There's nothing that anyone has done to create this situation. We just have to deal with it.
And the proposed dock by the Santa Barbaras is, are they seeking the minimum variance to the applicable standard in your opinion?
Yes, I believe we are.
And you're not aware of any prior actions taken by the applicant or any predecessors in title that led to seeking this variance, are you?
No, I'm not aware of any.
And as you've testified, due to the conditions of the site, in your opinion, would the denial of this variance cause the applicant an undue hardship?
Certainly, he wouldn't be able to have the dock that he should be entitled to.
Thank you, CJ, and I'm sure members of the council may have some questions for you.
Okay.
Ms. Doyle, I just wanted to ask you about the resolution that discusses the restriction of the size of the vessel or the location of the vessel, you know, whether it just be limited to the east. Was that explored? And why was that ruled out?
The objectors group did, they have a sketch, and I believe it's in your packets, that showed the dock moving closer to the shore. I'm just trying to put my hands on it. Here it is. Closer to the shore and a few feet to the east. Again, the problem with this scenario is that it minimizes the water depth and moves the dock closer to the abutter to the east. Our proposal had shown a 13-foot Boston whaler, which was what my client told me he intended to use at the dock. We showed it on the eastern side of the dock, although I know my client would rather not be restricted to only using one side of the dock. So that's the proposal before you in terms of the, you know, both sides of the dock. That's something I think it needs to be discussed.
I mean, would your client be opposed to a restriction to the 13-foot Boston whaler and having it parked, for lack of a better word, on the eastern side? I mean, can you answer that?
I know that he would rather not be restricted. He's also on this Zoom meeting, so you could talk to him directly, but I know for a fact he would rather not be restricted. He'd rather use it on both sides, potentially.
Are there other questions for Ms. Doyle?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Gomez?
Yeah, I know there are many other docks in the area. Is there any significant difference from the other docks that are presently there? It appears that what we're seeking is something very similar to the neighboring dock setups. Would that be correct?
That is correct, except that I know for a fact the dock, 2 properties to the east, is actually a much longer dock.
Okay.
They could extend further out because they didn't have the converging lot lines.
Yeah, so that from an adverse standpoint is what, not thinking longer, just you know, in keeping with the other docks. And I understand your point on the ability to get a longer dock. I guess also if we considered restricting it to a 13-foot boat, I for one wouldn't want to do that. I would think if there's any restrictions, you should allow at least the 16-foot dock. But I don't think that's a comment for you, maybe. But I think as it's written, the 13-foot boat has not. Is that a number that's hard fixed in this proposal? The size of the boat?
I
Or
believe
is that something? Yes.
he already has that boat.
Yeah. And does this application restrict them to a 13-foot boat?
It was
I didn't
not,
see that. I didn't
It-
see
it-
that.
It wasn't submitted as to be restrictive. We were asked what boat he intended to use, so
Yeah,
we showed
okay.
it on the plan.
So from your viewpoint, there is no size restriction at present. He has a 13-foot boat, which works well with the dock proposed, but it's not restricted to that necessarily.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mr. St.
so regarding the size of the boat, I mean, if the applicant wants to buy a boat that's too large for the dock and wreck it, that's their prerogative. 20 years ago, we put a restriction on a dock on Narrow River. I think the application, Jeff, was Lind, L-I-N-D, and said he couldn't have more than a 60 horsepower engine. It's ridiculous because 20 years ago, a 60 horsepower engine was like 18 inches long and 12 inches deep. Now it's half the size. I don't think there's anything in our regulations that'll, allows us to control the size of the boat, the dock. Either we think the dock is appropriate or we don't. It meets the red book or it doesn't. Thank you.
Well, I disagree with that because I think that we can put restrictions on use to minimize user conflicts if we were so inclined. And I'm not expressing a position at this point, but I want to understand, what are all the options for minimizing user conflicts. And that's why I wanted to hear from the applicant's engineer if that was a consideration and why would they not want to restrict themselves? It's an unusual configuration. There's a public right of way. This has features to it that might merit restrictions. And again, not taking a position, but I think it's fair game to explore that if we hear testimony about user conflicts.
So what are we gonna do? Like send somebody out there, they have a 17-foot boat instead of a 16-foot boat? If they have 18 inches of water, they're only gonna get a boat that can dock in 18 inches of water, correct, CJ?
I was just going to say that there's 18 inches of water. You can't bring a big
Yeah,
boat in there.
exactly.
It's not going to work.
So a restriction wouldn't be any skin off the applicant's back.
So what if they get a pontoon boat that doesn't draw any water, that has an electric engine? I mean, why are we micromanaging? This is still the United States of America.
Well, I'm not, I'm
Either they
just,
address it and
Yeah.
meet the red book criteria, or they don't. If we want to deny it, let's deny it.
so Jerry, Tracy has that in her staff report as one of the possible resolutions. So our staff has brought that to us. It's been proposed. We've asked the applicant about it. We're exploring the different ways we can permit this dock that is in an unusual location, given its proximity to a right-of-way and these other uses. So I think it's fair to explore it. I'm not interested in micromanaging what happens at the dock after we permit it, if we permit it. But I think that it's fair for us to go through all these options. In fact, I think we're required to do that because we have to, as part of this application, determine whether or not there are significant conflicts presented with existing uses and whether or not a variance, which is, an extraordinary relief, whether or not it's appropriate in this case, and whether or not the applicant has done the, has done all it can or not at all. They have to, that's
Let's
their,
wait another year then, see if they could do anything more.
well,
That's all.
okay.
Madam
All right,
Chair?
moving on from that, Mr. Gagnon.
Yes, my question would be related to the use of the east side and west side of the dock. With the removal of the outhauls, does that create a better situation in terms of getting in and out of the facility with the smaller boat, so that the west side is also a viable option now? It seemed like we were restricting to the east side because the outhauls were in the way on the west side. Is that what the issue was?
Correct. Before the original proposal, the corner of the float was 28.9 feet from the closest outhaul pole. Now we have a 40-foot wide right of way with no obstructions within it, just moving vehicles and you know, if there's a boat there, it's got to move out. But other than that, it's open. It's 40 feet wide open. So I think that makes a difference. I think they could put a boat on the west side.
Ms. Doyle, I'm just looking at page 10 of our packet. It's the aerial view and it shows the outhauls. The first two that are shown are the ones, I guess, like towards the land, are the ones that have been removed?
The two that were closest to Santa Barbara's property are the two that were moved,
Right.
removed.
And you said the third one was relocated, you believe is relocated?
We're not sure that it was totally removed, but rather relocated and lined up more along that westerly edge of the town right of way.
Okay.
And it hasn't been surveyed in, so that's approximate.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Doyle? Mr. DeAngelis, do you have additional questions for this witness?
I do not, Madam Chair, and the applicant rests.
Thank you.
Mr. Paul Santa Barbara is available if any members of the council have any questions for him. And I believe Mr. Jeff Balch, who testified at the first hearing, may also be on Zoom in case anybody has any questions relating to the land surveying aspect of this, but the applicant rests.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Willis, did you indicate earlier that the town has counsel?
A member of the town's planning staff would like to speak on behalf of the town.
Okay, so I guess I would ask them, that person, and what is the name?
Jill Sabo.
Jill Salo, if you could turn on your camera. Okay.
Hello.
Jill Sabo, got it.
Yep. Hi, Madam Chair, members of the
Hi.
council, thank you. My name is Jill Sabo. I do work for the town of Narragansett. I'm actually here today in the stead of Mike DeLuca, who I believe was at the first public hearing for this project about a year ago. And as you may recall, this project was actually requested for a public hearing by the town council. So this goes above a staff level. It did make it all the way to our town council, and our town council did ask for the public hearing. Just a couple of things. I was listening in and I heard, it sounds like there's two issues. The one issue is certainly the outhaul issue, which is a separate issue. And I heard you say you're going to discuss that at the end. But the first issue, the one tonight at hand, is the issue of the dock and the applicant's potential encroachment. I don't have the ability to talk about things that might be changing because we haven't seen a plan. And like I said, it would go back to our town council. But I just want to let you know that we're here today saying that there were no changes submitted that were brought to our attention. So the town does remain on the record as an objector for the dock in its current location, as it could negatively impact the use of the public's fairway in the water. So we recognize that the three outhauls were removed by the community, or removed and or relocated outside of the public right of way, but that that's not this application. This application is the potential encroachment. Certainly with a boat larger than 13 feet could certainly encroach in the public's right of way. So that's why we're here tonight. We haven't seen anything different, so our objection still stands.
Question for you.
Sure.
I think the applicant in its application has freely admitted that there would be some type of impact on existing uses on the right of way. I think that's undisputed. So the question in my mind, I think that we have to wrestle with is whether or not there would be a significant impact on existing uses. Can you speak to that?
Well, what I would say is I did hear that earlier that CRMC staff had acknowledged that they would entertain, could even administratively support alternative variances. And if one of those alternative variances did increase the distance to the public's right of way, that the town could possibly see fit again through the town council to revise or remove their objection.
And so which one would that be? What resolution specifically would that be?
Which resolution? I'm sorry?
Yeah, I think the resolutions have been laid out in the staff report.
I did not get the staff report. I apologize. I actually got assigned to this on Friday afternoon because Mr. DeLuca has a conflict. He's in the room next door to me meeting. If there was a report sent out to the public, it is not in my hands.
Okay.
So if you're referring to the resolutions from the staff report that was dated December 31st, 2019, is that something similar? That's the last report I have in hand.
Hold on. I don't see that date on the report that I'm looking at.
Madam Chair, that is the same staff.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Great.
I'm sorry, that's it. Yeah, it's the second page of the report. It shows that it's December 31st. So if you have that one,
I do.
You look at page 8, there's a list of resolutions there.
Correct. Okay, so I did go through those. So again, the first resolution for outhauls is not part of this project. The removal of the outhauls is not part of this project. The removal of the outhauls, which are located in the town right of way, we've already determined that those 3 outhauls have either been removed or relocated. The grandfathering of the reconfigured dock outbid and codifies. Outdated or abandoned outhauls codifies. Again, outhauls not part of this application. Reconfigured outhauls not part of this application. Just at a quick glance, it looks like the only one that's really in reference to this application is the last one, which is the restriction of the size of the vessel.
Yes. But
So I would just defer to, let me just take a quick peek and see when this letter was written. This letter was written February 11th, 2019, the one that came from our town council president and Mr. DeLuca. And this report came in December, so it does look like it came in after. I couldn't speak to it with any authority on what they thought. I'm sure some type of restriction that kept the encroachment outside of the public's right of way would be reviewed and possibly looked favorably upon, but I can't answer that. That's it goes to town council, unfortunately, at this point, because the request for the public hearing went to council.
Okay. What is the plan with respect, I don't know if you can speak to it, with respect to the unpermitted outhauls?
We don't have a plan as of yet. I did speak with CRMC staff earlier today, and it sounds like from this public hearing that there'll be some discussion of it at the end. And I would defer again to our harbor master, our harbor management plan. We do have the chairman of the Harbor Management Commission online as well with us today. But I wouldn't be able to answer that. We'll certainly work with CRMC and whomever we need to in order to rectify any situation over there.
Do those outhauls encroach upon the right of way?
The ones that are remaining, no, it doesn't appear that they do. The 3 that did encroach are removed.
And how do you define encroach? Is that use of part of the right of way? Is it that you're within the setback? I just want to understand.
Sure.
You are defining it.
Mm-hmm. The way I'm defining it, and I would defer to the harbor master if he's online to correct me if he defines it in a different way. But the plan that I'm looking at shows the end of the 3 stringers, the pole, at the end, in the right of way. So that is certainly an encroachment. As far as being able to access the stringer from the right of way, I don't think that would be an encroachment as long as the boat on the stringer wasn't sitting in the right of way.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Sabo? Other than me? Okay. And is your harbor master speaking?
I did a quick peruse through a little while ago. I didn't see him.
Okay.
I'm looking right now. I don't see him here.
He is here.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
Kevin is here?
I see a Harvey Cataldo, Narragansett Harbor.
Harvey Cataldo, he is the chairman of the Harbor Management Commission. He may want to speak as well.
Okay.
Kevin Connors is the harbor master.
I do not see that name, Madam Chair.
Okay, he's not on.
Not that I can see.
Okay. Ms. Sabo, is that it then for the town? You're on mute. You're on mute.
So, okay, so the host is not allowing me to unmute myself. Can you hear me now?
I see the Harvey Cataldo Narragansett Harbor.
He does, he has his hand raised.
Okay, all right, so let's allow him to speak. Mr. Moore, if you can unmute him.
Am I ready?
I can hear you. I can't see you. If you can turn your video on.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay, well, then you can just speak.
If I start pushing buttons, you're gonna lose me altogether here.
Okay, we can see the top of your head.
Oh, good, I'm here.
Okay, good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm all. All right, I'm Harvey Cataldo. I'm the chair of the Harbor Commission, and we've reviewed this plan. And our objection, which, you know, went right into the town, was all about the right of way. We're very protective of our right of ways. We weren't aware that those outhauls were in the right of way. When we found out through this application, we had them removed right away. When we review docs for the CRMC sends us the applications, what we look at, does the dock interfere with the town right of way, any right of way, or does it interfere with our mooring fields? And generally they don't. So what we do is we just file them, no objection, because actually we don't do docks. But this particular dock was right up against our right of way, and I believe in order to use a boat on it, the boat's going to be in our right of way. Not only are we protective of right of ways, CRMC is protective of right of ways. So outhauls, even if the outhauls, if we didn't take them out, if we were going to use that right of way for something, we could get them out, just pull them out. Once a dock's there, that's going to be there forever. So we have on a butter, the Taylor family. All right, that's one family. We're speaking for the whole town. We're speaking for 15,000 people. Not all of them are going to use that right away, but people do use that right away. So for us to allow somebody to encroach on it that much, that's just wrong. But and that's how the whole Harbor Commission felt. That's how we voted. And but we wouldn't have a problem if that dock was shortened a little. I mean, I think I was looking at there's 18 inches there. Is that high or low water? The 18 inches, is that low tide or high tide?
Ms. Doyle, can you answer that?
I can't hear
her. Yeah.
I'm trying to unmute. Okay, got it. That is at mean low water.
Okay.
1.5 feet is at mean low water.
So generally, there's going to be more than 18 inches there. Right. Most of the time, most of all the time, there's going to be way more than 18 inches there. So if they shorten that dock, and you were talking a 3-inch difference, if they shortened the dock, like the town had suggested, because by shortening the dock, you get away from the right-of-way line. As long as that boat's not sticking into the right-of-way, I don't think the Harbor Commission is gonna have a problem with that, which we would convey to the town. All we're worried about is the boat sticking into the right-of-way. Because the dock, I don't believe, that's been a while since I looked at this, but I don't think the dock was actually in the right-of-way. It was straddling the line, which meant the boat would be in the right-of-way.
No, the proposal is the float is totally within the property line extensions, and even a boat on the west side is still within the property line extensions. It
What
doesn't
was the
encroach.
distance
on
between the
right-of-way.
float, the distance between the float and the property line?
Correct.
No, what was that distance between the float, the west side of the float and the property line?
6.5 feet,
5 feet?
6.5.
6.5 feet. Okay, I think what the town community development was looking at is if you shorten that up a little bit, that would give us a lot more room. I mean, 6.5 feet, that's a pretty small boat. If they put something bigger on there, it's gonna be sticking. Most boats are 8 feet. No, more normal boats in the pond.
And when you say shorten up, is that the moving 5 feet in towards the shore that Ms. Doyle testified to earlier as being a request? Is that what you're
I think, yeah, I think that's what, I came into this late too because Mike DeLuca had this other meeting, so Jill asked me to like kind of fill in for him, so I didn't get a chance to review our old plans and stuff. But I think it was Mike that had said if it came back a little bit, and I wasn't sure whether it had to move to the east at all. I think if we brought it back a little bit, then you're getting further away from the property line. And if 18 inches, I don't know what the graduates are of the shore on the bottom there, but it doesn't seem to me that if it's 18 inches at low tide, that's a lot of water.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just saying that as a boater, and I've been a boater all my life. So, and I used to live on the Narrow River, so I know what short water is. That's 3 inches.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Cataldo? Thank you. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Jill Sabo had her hand back up.
Okay.
Hi, I'm trying to get my video to work. There we go. Thank you. So Harvey is correct that in the letter from February, we did ask for the float to be shortened and moved just slightly to the north, which would allow a larger gap. I just want to echo all the sentiments that Harvey said. So just to be clear, that's exactly what Mr. DeLuca and the council president had asked at the time.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I have a list of other speakers, so I guess I'll just go down the list. I have a Great Island Community Group, and it would be, the first person would be David Samararo. Hey, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to spend some time addressing a number of the issues that you've been speaking about thus far tonight. First of all, let me pick up with the idea of the use of this right-of-way that Mr. Cataldo was speaking about. As you may or may not know, the Great Island plans of development date back to the 1940s. And Great Island has 9 rights of way that were deeded to the town, along with a couple of lots deeded to the Great Island Association to provide water access to the residents of Great Island and the residents of Narragansett. This particular right of way is the most heavily used right of way on the island. and it's been used for the 75 years that it's existed. Now, I was going to go into a number of background comments about the concerns of the Great Island Objector Group and others, but I'd like to pick up on the specifics of the dock as proposed and talk about some of the elements and the solutions that we think are viable that give room for the community to use the right of way and give room for the dock to exist. First of all, the idea that this dock is permanent is very important. It's going to be here for generations and generations. And if we put the dock in place in a way that it obstructs the right of way or hinders the normal use of that right of way, it's going to be there forever. And we think that the way it's designed today, it is just too close to the town extended property line, that being 6.5 feet, to allow for enough buffer so that the use of the public area won't be in conflict with the private dock facilities as they're being used. We would like more space, and that's one of our concerns. Now, there's talk about the float placement. It is just 6.5 feet from the town extended property line, and the Taylor buffer is 6.3 feet. They're relatively the same, and yet we have a public right of way with people swimming, people paddleboarding, canoeing, kayaking, and using small boats to get out to the mooring field to pass through that right of way. And we think there's just more room needed to allow for these people to use the public way, right of way. And to have those two buffers be the same seems to be a little bit out of whack. Now, I'd also say that while the channel is 40 feet wide, the water space is 40 feet wide, the channel is not. And at low tide, the channel is much narrower than 40 feet. And therefore, we have to give consideration for proper passage of boats during low tide as well as high tide. And I think 40 feet is somewhat of a optimistic view. And in fact, that's why our group worked diligently with the town as soon as we found out about those outhauls interfering with the right of way, that we went to our members, we went to our residents along with the town, and we explained the situation. And in fact, our group removed those outhaul poles that were interfering in concert with the town approval. So we think that right of way ought to be left unobstructed. Now, if we look at the application as it has been submitted, it does show the whaler on the easterly side. That's the low water side. What we think is that by moving that dock, there'll be more water and more flexibility by using the westerly side. So you'll hear that in our proposal. I'd like to comment on the specifics of what that amounts to. We believe the town side buffer should be increased to 12 feet. 12 feet, when matched up with a float that far away, allows for an 18 to 23 foot boat, or a boat that's up to 9.5 feet in beam, to be attached to the westerly side. And at that point, even with 12 feet and a 9.5 beam, you've got just a couple of feet over into the, with a 12 foot buffer, you fit within the allotted space, and the rear stern of the boat will still be not encroaching on the town right of way. It takes 12 feet to house an 18 to 23 foot boat on the westerly side. And that's why we're proposing that we do extend it to 12 feet. And we don't believe that precludes using the easterly side either. However, there will be a depth issue on the easterly side. And based upon the C.J. Doyle commentary that we've received, we think it's a couple inches. And our view is that when considering giving the proper space between a private dock and the public use of a right of way, we ought to give deference to the right of way with this 12-foot buffer. And to the extent that there is a deficiency in the water, we feel that either an exception should be made to grant the deficient level of water, or perhaps grant the authority to remove some few inches of silt from the bottom of the seabed to allow the proper 18 inches if that's what you desire. But in any event, allowing for a larger buffer on the town side and finding a solution to the water depth does provide the opportunity to make the objections from the Great Island people go away, as well as provide the opportunity for the Santa Barbaras to have their dock. Not only a dock that can be used on one side, but a dock that can be used on both sides. So we do recommend that the buffer be 12 feet and that the water deficiency be addressed in whatever manner is sufficient to meet the CRMC requirements. Whether that's a change in the Taylor buffer, that's up to you. Whether that's a change through an exception of the water depth, that's your choice, or through some removal of silt. One more thing, and I've mentioned 18 to 23 feet. The issue of encroaching into the town right away is one of size of boat. And we modeled out up to a 23-foot boat attached at that 18-foot float. And if the float is placed 12 feet from the buffer line or the property line of the town, then we're confident that the 23-foot boat will fit and not encroach. If you allow a larger boat, it will, because you're coming at an angle and the stern is going to stick into the right of way. So we recommend that you limit boat size to 23 feet and beam size to 9 feet. Now, that's not such a bad limitation, seriously, because with the water depth there, a larger boat's going to be sitting on the ground if it's parked there overnight or over low tide. So practically speaking, 23 feet is a good sized boat and it gives a great deal of flexibility. Lastly, I'd like to just comment that because this is a tight spot, it's really important that when the CRMC approves a plan, that they assure that the dock gets placed accordingly. We've had some circumstances on Seacrest on the other side where a property owner actually built property onto one of the other town rights of way, and it led to legal action. It led to ripping the thing down, and we don't want to go through all that again. We'd rather have a situation that's done right to begin with. So we would like to make sure that you assure there's oversight of anything you approve, to make sure it's put where you approve it, and that to the extent that there's any damage to the right of way from the construction, that gets corrected. So those are the major themes of what we would like to offer. And we do have several other people that will speak tonight on specific topics that I may have touched on. But in summary, we believe the applicant's dock plan as proposed is really not in the best interests of Great Island as a community or the town of Narragansett, because it will intrude into the right of way. And we do recommend that you consider alternatives like we've suggested, or if you've got other alternatives that you think achieve the same objectives, then that's fine. We're interested in making sure that whatever's done with that dock across time does not encroach into the 40-foot right of way. We would be opposed to the approval of the dock as it has been submitted. Again, because we don't feel that's appropriate for the community or for the town. I'd love to take questions. If you have some, I'd try to go through that fast so I don't waste your time.
Thank you. I thought that was very efficient as you presented it, and I think I heard at least 3 different proposals. I don't know if it's a combination of all those or.
Let me try summarizing. It's one proposal.
Okay.
A 12-foot town size side buffer.
Got that.
A response to any water depth impact, that moving that buffer to a 12-foot size, respond to that water depth issue through one of several alternatives available to you. And further encroachment on the Taylor side, if you want to move the thing further that way. Draw an exception or grant an exception to the water depth of 18 inches to what will probably be 2 inches or maybe 2.5 inches of variance from that number. Or if that's unacceptable, authorize some removal of silt. That will resolve the water problem. And lastly, add a restriction to boat size to a maximum of 23 feet and 9.5 feet of beam. That all is one
And-
package.
And the 12-foot buffer that you would like, that's achieved by the shortening up of
Well, I
the,
think
Go
so
ahead.
the consequence of making a 12-foot buffer on the town side and keeping a 6.3-foot buffer on the Taylor side forms a different set of intersecting lines in the water.
right?
And by centering the dock float in the new intersecting lines, it'll effectively be about, I'm guessing, I haven't calculated this to the inch, but I'm guessing it'll probably push the float in about 4 to 5 feet, and it'll certainly move it over about 4 feet or so, maybe 5 feet. But I'm sure CJ Doyle can put her computers to work and tell you exactly where it would be.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. You're not giving us the script or proposal for how you achieve that. You're saying we want that.
Yeah, I'm giving you the
However you achieve it.
parameters.
Okay,
I'm giving you the parameters which
got it.
we think will work, and I can tell you that our objector group, they would rather see no dock there, but they're realistic. And they're realizing that we have to be neighbors and we have to work well together, and we're willing to just come up with a solution that we think will work for us and work for the Santa Barbaras, and we think that will. And again, my last piece of salesmanship is that if you place the dock there, I think it'll have enough water for the Santa Barbara's whaler, which just draws 9 inches, or their sea-doos, which draw even less, and they can be put on the easterly side, and they can put up to their 20-foot, 23-foot boat on the westerly side, and we're all happy about it.
Okay. And you've had discussions with the Santa Barbaras about your proposal?
We had 2 meetings with the town and with the Santa Barbara's attorney. And we went through all of this discussion, and we expected to get back a full evaluation of moving the buffer lines as I just described and moving the float as I've described. And we never got a response. We did find one in the file, but we never got a copy. And Mr. Crook, who's lined up to speak after me, is intending to do a little detailed discussion of our proposal and the CJ Doyle response. And we felt that the CJ Doyle really did not recognize the parameters I've just given you. And it made some different assumptions. And I don't think we ever got a water depth evaluation in the float location that we are suggesting with the parameters that we're giving. So
Okay.
that's undone.
Okay. Any questions before we move on to Mr. Crook? All right, well, I'm sorry. I have both Mr. Hudner and first, and then we'll go to Mr. Sahajian. Mr. Hudner.
I have a question. You mentioned that the channel at low water is much farther west, as I understood it, than the boundary of the right of way. How far is the channel at low water from the property line?
Well, actually, the main channel actually is along the easterly side of the right of way. And when we go in and out with boats, we pull over to the easterly side and we go all along, right along the existing set of docks, the Ramella dock and the one thereafter. And typically, when we head out to the mooring fields or beyond, we stay within 5 feet or 6 feet of those docks. And that's where the deepest water is. As you go to the west, that water shallows out quite a bit. So that's what I meant about the 40 feet being somewhat illusionary.
Okay.
So it would be deeper, closer to where the Santa Barbara's dock would be, along that side.
Anything else, Mr. Hudner?
No, so it's a 6.5 foot spacing right now. Is that correct?
Yes.
And your channel basically, are you saying that your channel depth and the eastern boundary of the right of way are the same?
No, I'm saying it's towards that side. I can't say that it's right up against the eastern side of the right of way, but it's not along the western edge of the right of way either. I can tell you that for sure. It's the middle to the eastern side rather than to the western side of that right of way.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how much room there actually is to berth a boat on the west side of the dock. And it's only 6.5 feet from the boundary.
Yes.
And the channel is further west than that.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Yes, somewhat.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to have a picture of this. I spent a lot of time on the water, so I'm trying to see maneuvering and congestion and all the practical issues. Okay. And most of the increase of width between the dock and the property line that you're talking about, the 12 feet, is the result of shortening the dock by maybe 4 feet. We don't know for sure, but I think Ms. Doyle talked about that earlier.
I started with the idea of moving the boundary, the buffer to 12 feet, because that's how much room you need as a buffer to attach an 18 to 23 foot boat on the side of the float and not encroach into the town right away. So I start with the 12 foot and say, where does that line intersect with the Taylor 6.3 foot line? And that defines where the float will be. And I'm sure CJ Doyle could calculate that in a snap.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty material aspect of the conversation.
Yeah.
Me anyway.
Yeah, I'd hope that was done for this meeting, but it's not.
And that was part of what the town was talking about, Ms. Savo also.
The town, I've discussed this in depth with the town. They wouldn't tell you they want 12 feet. They would tell you they want either a shortened float and they want to move somewhat and they want restrictions on the boat size. Our group of people are worried about restrictions on the boat size that are unrealistic, because that has people in the neighborhood always saying, well, geez, a renter just came in with a boat that's 2 feet bigger and now it's a problem and they're going to call the harbor master. We would rather never have to call anybody to complain about anything. And if we put it too close, it'll cause that kind of problem.
Yeah, I think we need metrics though. I mean, how do you get to 12 feet? So that's why I'm trying to get a picture of all this. I'll stop asking questions, but I think this is important for everybody else to sort out as well, so we can understand what these different resolution options actually mean in terms of the length of the dock, its position, and how that affects the right of way. The Taylor side seems to be okay, living with a lot less on that side than the right of way side. So,
Mr. Hedner, I agree. That's why I was asking, how do you achieve that? And I appreciate in one respect that objectors are coming up with parameters that gives flexibility, but then we don't have the detail of exactly how that works. And that might be something then we go back to Tracy with and say, how do you review this and how is that achieved? So we can come back to it. I know you can finish up your question, Mr. Hudner. I think Mr. Sahajian wanted to ask something.
I'm done. I don't want to beat this to death, but I think we need to get answers that are very clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sahajian?
Couple of comments. I was absent at the January meeting and I did read the minutes in February of 2020. So I feel that I'm eligible to participate and vote in this manner. I just wanted to go on record stating that.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Sahajian. That's
I'm sorry. And a couple of things. We really have to focus on the criteria in the CRMP. Okay. The previous witness was very articulate, but once again, right, whether we vote to approve it or deny it, many of our decisions get appealed. Okay, we're quasi-judicial. we should focus on the matter at hand and the criteria in the red book. And I just think we're getting off the path on that. And then I have a question for Mr. Willis. Mr. Willis, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so is it Abalone, Avalon Road? Okay, and I'm in my real estate office, so I have maps. Looks like it's about 37 feet wide.
Okay.
So is the right of way, right, 37 feet wide, the town right of way, running perpendicular down Abalon Road to the Great Salt Pond? Or when it hits the pond, does it expand and get wider?
No, it should not.
Okay. So I think if we focus on the width of the right of way, okay, and then analyze the red book, the application, and Tracy's very extensive report, we can make a decision. I'm sure there are more objectors that want to speak, but they should know that they should really focus on whether the application meets the criteria in the CRMP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sajan. All right, the next speaker is Mr. Crook. Also from the Great Island Community Group.
If you're in the audience, can you please raise your hand because I cannot find you?
Mr. Moore, have you found Mr. Crook?
I have not.
Okay. All right, well, why don't we move on? We can come back to him, but let's move on to Alice Barati.
Do you see me?
I hear you, don't see you.
Okay. How about now?
We can see you, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Alice Barati, and my husband Vonnie and I live at 12 Whitecap Road on Great Island. For over 40 years, we have lived directly across the street from the right-of-way, which abuts the property at 10 Seacrest Drive. When we look out, we have a clear and complete view of the area and are very much aware of its daily usage. People young and old are always walking down to the cove to swim, float, kayak, paddleboard, clam, shell, explore, etc. It is the gateway to Great Island's largest mooring field, the salt pond, and ultimately the ocean. It is truly the center of summer life on the island. For those of us not on the water, this is our oasis, our part of heaven. Potato Island Cove and the right-of-way represent a very beautiful and unique setting. This particular right-of-way is the most used one on the island and possibly the most used right-of-way in the town of Narragansett. Over the years, naturally, things have changed. People have come and gone, and the properties have undergone major changes as construction meets the challenges of today's living. Great Island has evolved from a very small cottage community to a community of larger year-round homes. Great Island is a close-knit community whose population continues to bloom over the summer season. Everyone has the right to enjoy their property, as well as any public island areas to the fullest. The location of the proposed permanent dock should meet everyone's needs, those of the community and those of the owners. Fulfillment of this cannot infringe on the rights of others. Our utmost concern is the non-compromising of the community's ability to access and use this area completely and safely. The encroachment of the proposed permanent dock, as indicated by the requested variance, into this area will jeopardize the safety of those using the area. We are also concerned with the ambiguity of both the size and location of the boat to be docked, as well as the enforcement of specifics regarding the above mentioned. Of added interest and concern is our observation of the very active rental status of 10 Seacrest Drive. The property is rented throughout the year, many times to multiple families. Parking has also become very limited on Seacrest Drive due to the on-street parking by not only the property owners, but also the renters. The constant turnover of people who are unaware of the proximity of a public right-of-way and its usage concerns us. Also, many of these renters arrive with their own boats, sometimes multiple boats and jet skis, and of course, trailers. These renters will presumably have access to the proposed dock, as access to the owner's mooring is actively listed on the rental website. Our fear is that any restrictions placed on this dock will not be adhered to by the renters. They are there primarily to enjoy themselves and maximize the use of the rental. The right-of-way was created by the developers of the island and upheld by the town of Narragansett to perpetually provide for all safe access to the waters around Great Island. And Great Island is truly an island within the pond. It is accessible from land only by bridge. We sincerely hope that the integrity and original purpose of creation of this right-of-way will always be preserved without any compromise or impediment for the usage and safety of all. I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Ma'am, could you spell your last name, please?
B as in boy, U-R-A-T-T-I.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barati.
Thank you.
Can we go back to Mr. Crook? Mr. Moore, do you see Mr. Crook?
I do not.
Okay, all right. Then it looks like we have a Chris Brook in addition to Robert. Is there a Chris Brook?
Yes, there is.
Hello, can you see me?
We can see you and hear you.
All right. Hi, my name is Christopher Brook, and I'm representing my parents, Alan and Ann Brook, that live at 7 Abalone Road, Great Island. That's diagonally across the street from the right-of-way that's going down and right next to the Baratis. Their property is, let's see, my purpose in speaking to you today is to share the neighborhood concern that the installation of this dock would greatly reduce the use of the public of this cove. For dozens of Great Islanders, homeowners, boat owners, and their guests, this right-of-way is the only access to Potato Island Cove. The area is quite small, only about 25 feet wide of usable space. Keep in mind too, I know everybody's talking about 40 feet and that sort of thing. There's beach grass over there, there's rocks, so it's a very narrow strip of land that you can actually use. If the proposed dock juts out into the channel in the beach area, it is much more difficult to see swimmers, especially children, while they're swimming. The main channel that we've mentioned to the east of the docks is where people swim, especially at low tide, because the water there, you know, I can stand up, I'm about 6 feet tall. I can stand up there at high tide. There's not a lot of water there at any point of the time. And the channel that we're using is just beyond the docks that Mr. Hudner was talking about earlier. If we encroach on that by having a boat on it, you can picture the boat engine being cropped up at while it's not in use, and that would also now jut out into the main channel. So when boats are coming in, they'll be going around this extra boat, and there's children swimming there. There's other boat owners coming in and out, and the channel itself is maybe 10 to 15 feet wide, and that's enough room for two small boats to comfortably go in and out. Usually only a single file in and out to the actual right of way. Let's see. I wanted our CRMC to understand the community of Great Islanders have no animosity against the Santa Barbaras. Most Islanders are transplants from other cities and states. They're not native Rhode Islanders, and each come together for a common agenda to enjoy the island, water, and its beauty. I, on my own, I've twice bailed out the Paul Santa Barbara's boat. When they first came to the island, they were kind of rookies, if you will, and they put a boat in the water and they put it on a stringer, and twice it almost sank. We, being good Islanders, we bailed the boat out unsolicited, made sure it didn't sink, which could cost them tens of thousands of dollars in repairs to the motors. We then made an effort to call the Santa Barbaras and let them know that, gee, you really should get a sump pump on that. And I think Paul now is aware of that. That's the type of community that we are. We don't bear any animosity towards the Santa Barbaras, and we really hope these folks are going to have to be our neighbors for decades to come, that we can come to some type of mutual agreement that will work for everyone. But we're all concerned. Children play in that pond on their own oftentimes because the parents feel safe letting them play down there. If jet skis are coming around because tenants are renting this space is up on Airbnb and VRBO and is actively rented, and that's perfectly their prerogative. I have rental properties myself. I totally understand that, but I also know that I do things to rein in my own tenants because I don't have control of them. And then having an area with a dock that now they can bring boats to, and now other children are playing there, creates a hazardous situation. So that's my presentation. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brook. Okay, we have Michael's son next.
Hi there. I'm just starting my video. Okay, so good evening, Madam Chair and members of the CRMC Council. My name is Michael Sun. My wife and I are residents of Great Island, and we live at 112 Conch Road. So I'm here as a parent of 3 children, ages 8 to 14, and I'm speaking on behalf of, I think, many parents and grandparents whose children use the Cove as a safe and protected recreation area. This cove and the public access corridor really is as much a public beach as it is access point for small watercraft, right? The proximity of Potato Island, as others have said, make this a particularly attractive area for recreation. And on a typical summer day, there's a rotating cast of children and adults in the cove or swimming across the channel to explore the island, which is just 200 feet away. My concerns around the proposed dock really focus on safety. Now, Madam Chair, I have a picture of the area in question that provides some context. If it's helpful for me to show it, I would like to. If this is irregular, I'm happy to proceed without it.
Yeah, is it something that you would do by share screen, or you're going to just hold it up?
Oh, I wouldn't. Yeah, I'll share screen. I wouldn't do that to you. Try and look at it.
Okay, Mr. Longo, that's fine, correct?
Yes, because the meeting's being recorded, so it will be part of the record.
Good.
Excellent.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is the Cove. This is the property in question. I think this was taken in the summer of 2019. So these outhaul poles have either been removed or moved. I could probably zoom out a little bit, and this is really the extension of the right of way in question. And I think back to Mr. Hudner's question prior, the boats essentially, come out and then go down this path and then kind of go out here through the mooring field, in case that helps as a visual. So going back to my concerns, right? They really propose, they really focus on safety. Boaters have always had to be careful coming back to the Cove and be on the lookout for those in the water, as it's common to see people in the water in the 40-foot right of way, and particularly in low tide when that channel shrinks. If a boat is docked at the proposed structure, as per the application, this is going to create a blind spot for swimmers and boaters, right? A child that's splashing or swimming in the water isn't necessarily going to hear a boat coming in, and that visual blind spot, whether it's a jet ski, a whaler, a 23-foot powerboat, makes some sort of accident a very likely possibility in the future. Even if all the outhauls were removed, this would still be an issue just due to the nature of the geography of the Cove. This, combined with the fact that the applicant's property is marketed as a short-term rental, is what really concerns me and many others. Right? While there are many responsible renters, So
Madam Chair, this is going off base right now. It doesn't matter who owns the property, who lives in the property.
Well, I would
It
like to.
doesn't matter if it's a
if the-
rental property or
The
not.
chair will let me.
Yeah,
Matt.
it doesn't bother me. It's public comment. You know, we take a lot of testimony in.
Yeah, but.
It's not directly relevant, and you know, it goes to enforceability if there's any restriction. So
Enforceability, so if they
Excuse me,
rent the house,
could
they
you tell
can't.
me who's speaking? I have no idea who is speaking.
I'm sorry, reporter Jerry Sahazian speaking. So if they rent the house, they can't use the boat. So I don't understand where this is going. You said it goes to use. So if the house is a rental, the tenants can't use a boat? I don't understand what this is.
no, that's not what I'm saying.
I'm sorry then.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
Okay, let's just move on. If Mr. Sun has said it's a short-term rental, we heard that from another speaker. I think we get the point.
I can wrap up. Actually, it's just going to be pretty quick. So you know, my point being that there are many responsible renters, but there are many that aren't and treat it as a playground, right? This past summer, there were several renters who brought their personal watercraft. Others have talked about this as well. That engaged in some reckless behavior, you know, pulling their pontoon boat up onto the beach for the week. So what terrifies me is the prospect of someone coming in on a boat or a jet ski at high speed who's not familiar with the geography of the cove and doesn't realize that there are children in the water. My issue with the proposal is I don't think it takes safety into account, and would ask that CRMC have the applicants revise their proposal to make safety a top priority. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Sun. Okay, I'll give one more opportunity for Robert Crook, but I'll ask Mr. Moore if he showed up.
I still do not see him, Madam Chair.
Okay, all right. I have one more person on my list, and then after that, I'll ask if there's anyone else who's not on my list who would like to speak, and that's Michael Taylor, speaking on behalf of 15 Seacrest Drive, the abutter on the opposite side of the proposed dock.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Thank you. Just for the record, Michael Taylor. I live at 143 Bridle Path Drive, full-time here in Southern Connecticut. I am the son of Robert Taylor, and unfortunately my dad recently passed away, so I'm representing the estate for that property. And we are the property that abuts the Santa Barbara's property. So, you know, I've reviewed this, I've listened to a lot of different things, and candidly, my position remains the same as what my father's was too. You know, for us, you know, as my dad mentioned on public record, and I think others here have mentioned this too, at some point there will be an opportunity that we may build on that property, and we want to keep the opportunity to place a dock on that property if that's the case. So all the different proposals that are being discussed, there are certain things that would work for that. There are certain things that will work against that. But again, just, you know, on record, I'd just like to state that, you know, my position hasn't really changed from what my father originally talked about. I think it was back in, I want to say the December, January timeframe was when he was last on public record. So the other thing that I would mention too is that with those poles removed, I've lived down there my entire life. I also have walked around and played on that beach as well. My kids have done the same. It is a high traffic area, but it is not a high speed area. The water does not allow for boats to come in very quickly. The water table doesn't allow for that. So yes, there is a lot of traffic that's in that area. But you know, I hope we can all come to a solution here that works for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Okay, I'll ask if there's anyone else who would like to speak either for or against this project. You can raise your hand now and we'll hear from you.
Madam Chair, I'm told that Robert Crook is in the room, but under a different name, but I'm still having problems finding them. I'm asking them if they're here, please use the raise hand function or send me a message in the chat box so I know who you are.
Okay, well, We'll give you a couple minutes to try to find him, or for him to find you.
Here's David S. is going to relay their comments. I do not see them in the chat box either. Okay. It's Dave Seminaro again, who's going to relay for Robert.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the confusion. Apparently, Mr. Crook had some technical problems and couldn't connect. So I'll read the script that he had prepared for him.
Okay.
Mr. Crook is located at 49 Starfish Drive, and he says that he's been a resident there for over 60 years. He said, I would like to discuss the comments of CJ Doyle, PE, for the applicant, and our response to these comments concerning the proposed dock. These comments are from CJ Doyle's letter to Tracy Silva of CRMC dated March 3rd, 2020. I responded to Tracy Silva in my note of August 27, 2020. Both documents are in the CRMC file. We find that CJ Doyle's report contains a number of errors and misleading statements concerning our GI, that's Great Island Neighbors proposal. There are 5 paragraphs in CJ Doyle's document. Paragraph 1 contains 3 comments. The first claims our proposal shifts the position of the dock 4 feet to the east towards the Taylor property. This is not true. Our proposal increases the west side right-of-way side buffer from 6.5 feet to 12 feet to assure the openness of the right-of-way while maintaining the Taylor buffer side as the Taylor side buffer as it is, 6.3 feet. The second comment states that the depth of the seaward end of the float would be reduced to 1.4 feet versus 1.5 feet required by CRMC. This is probably true and would probably require a waiver by CRMC. However, the deviation is small, 1.2 inches. And at the 2 meetings we had with the applicant's attorney and the town, it was thought that this would be well within a deviation that CRMC might allow. The third comment that states that our proposal would change the float position. The third comment states that our proposed change in float position would result in a reduction of the water depth at the shore end of the float from 0.9 to 0.6 feet. This depth change could and probably should be avoided by just shortening the length of the float. An 18-foot float is not needed for a 13-foot boat. Paragraph 2 states that our proposal shifts the position of the dock 4 feet towards the Taylor property. And once again, we state that that's not true. We propose that we maintain the Taylor buffer of 6.3 feet. So no change in the Taylor buffer. Paragraph 3 claims that our proposal calls for berthing a boat on the east, meaning Taylor side of the float only. This is also not called for in the GI neighbors proposal. In fact, our proposal increased the RO right-of-way buffer. In fact, our proposal, which increases the ROW buffer, facilitates uses of both sides of the float. According to CJ Doyle's 5th paragraph, the Santa Barbara proposal seeks to optimize water depth while centering the dock within the property line extensions. Our neighbor's proposal results in no significant impact to these objectives. Our neighbor's proposal provides for docking of the whaler on the easterly side of the float and also supports tide-dependent docking of the applicant's 23-foot boat or that of a renter or future owner on the westerly side without intrusion into the 40-foot right-of-way. Our proposal thus provides more flexibility on into the future, minimizing the potential for contention between neighbors. Robert Crook.
Thank you. That was helpful. I don't know if you can answer this question, but I think it was your third point on changing or Mr. Crook's point on changing the float position. And the position is to shorten the length of the float because you wouldn't need it as long if you just have a 13-foot whaler. But I thought that I heard you say in your own comments that you wanted to provide the ability for, did you say 18 to 23-foot boat? So I was trying to square your comments with his position on this.
Yeah, he was just trying to say that if you're concerned about the water depth at the shore side of the float, that you could alleviate that by shortening the dock. Now, that's a separate comment from the one that I was making earlier.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, he couldn't present it himself.
Well, all right. That's good that you were able to read it. Thank you. Are there any other people who are wanting to speak either for or against? I don't see any hands raised. Is that accurate, Mr. Moore?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. So I want to do two things. I want to go back to, I think we should probably go back to the applicant first to see if they want to respond. And then after that, I'd like to ask Miss Sylvia a couple of questions.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I would at some point in time like to make a brief sum, but I thought after listening to the comments by the various individuals, I'd just like to ask a couple of more questions of CJ Doyle, focusing upon the issues raised by the objectors in terms of her engineering opinion, if I could.
Yes, please.
CJ, can you unmute? She's trying.
There we go.
Okay, CJ, you've heard the testimony of various objectors with respect to proposals for a 12-foot buffer, for example. We'll take that first. What is your opinion in terms of how a 12-foot buffer from the right-of-way extension could be obtained?
The abutters sketch plan that was attached to the March 3rd letter that I sent to Tracy Sylvia showed the 12-foot that Mr. Cimarero was talking about. They were shortening the distance of the float from the land by approximately 5 feet. And then they were shifting the entire dock over 4 feet toward Mr. Taylor's property. Because it's a pie-shaped lot, moving it over the 4 feet, they were still allowing 6 feet to the property line extension, but they were minimizing the water. So this is what was addressed in that letter of March 3rd that I sent to Tracy Sylvia. So this is all issues that have been discussed at this point.
Yeah, we had the opportunity to hear from the Taylor family at the end of the public comment. And I note that previously you had mentioned that you did not believe the Taylors would provide any further relief. So does that firm up your position that the 19 feet or thereabouts that the Taylor family provided is the most they're going to give?
Correct. That's my belief.
And if you shorten the dock 5 feet, again, what happens to the depth, the water depth?
We're minimizing the water depth. We're going to the 1.4 feet at the seaward end of the float and a 0.6 foot at the landward end of the float.
And CRMC requires a minimum of 1.5.
That is correct. At the end of the dock at mean low water.
I have no further questions for CJ, Madam Chair.
Okay. I might have a couple questions. Are there any other council members that would like to ask questions of Ms. Doyle?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just received a text from my client, and perhaps he'd like to address some of the issues that have been discussed by the neighborhood and by council members. So, Mr. Santa Barbara?
I think you'll need to be sworn in by Mr. Longo.
Good evening, council.
Mr. Santa Barbara, could you raise your right hand? Yes. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do. I do.
And is your spouse Tara going to be speaking as well?
She will be not. She'll be supporting me, but she won't be speaking.
Okay, thank you. And just you can put your hand down and say your piece.
So this question, and I just want to make a brief comment. Everybody's probably just wanting this to speed up a little bit. So I'm not a great speaker, and I like to bring that point out, but I have good points, and I have a question to address for CJ. I hear everybody's concern. When we designed this dock, okay, we went to the Taylors. We tried talking to the residents there. Our first proposal was out further. We shortened the dock back. We moved it towards Taylor. We asked Taylor for another couple feet. He was so willing. We understand this is a town right away. We understand that it is a highly used area. Myself, my kids, my family, we come down with the kayak, we walk out, we get to wastewater. Wastewater is probably 40, 50 feet out at high tide, maybe a little bit in towards shore. But this is used for kayaking, small boats, bringing in a boat, a whaler to drop off, a wife, a kid to go out to a bigger boat or enjoy the area. So I know we have a really an area that's, you have so many obstacles. Okay, so we have poles there that've been there forever. No, at the first hearing, nobody in the council knew, even the residents, us, that these poles were in the middle of the right-of-way, the riparian right-of-way, which goes out to the water. The residents were nice enough to make that adjustment, move the poles out of the way. That opened up roughly 50 feet of fairway out into the water. And with our first meeting, we went through all this. We spent the time with the council to go through all this and hear all this. So at that meeting, the poles did exist. All 3 poles were in the middle of that right away. We tried to design that dock and shorten it up based upon the existing condition. So right now, the way it is now, we have these poles eliminated. And that just opens up the whole fairway rights to the water. And I understand the residents and the neighbors wanting to move it over 4 feet, shorten it back 5 feet. We can't move it to the right. So if we shortened it, and this question is for CJ, we shortened the dock, we pulled it back 5 feet. Okay, I'm a boater. I guess I'm a rookie, but I'm a boater. I've been boating since I've been 14. I have my 6-pack license. I'm a commercial fisherman as well. So I spend countless hours on the water. As the late Robert Taylor has mentioned, you could get the Queen Mary into that channel and have no problem, yet we're all fighting over a situation that doesn't exist. My question to CJ is, if we brought that float back, you have a pie-shaped area, okay? Our dock is right in the middle of that. So we give the rights to the people to use the waterway, the consideration to the Taylors, which they've signed off on already. We've been working on this project for since December of 2018, back and forth with the town. Nobody at the town can make a decision. We even met with the harbor master. We've gone to town council meetings. We've gone to CRMC hearings, and we've done everything we've could to make the situation as best for everybody. So to be here and this late in the game and have we're stuck on the same topic of this dock and placement. There's no other place that this dock could go. And I, as a boater, a commercial fisherman, you could pull one of those big fishing boats in there. This area is not used for that. With the shortening of the dock, my question is to CJ, how much of a difference would that make from the corner of the riparian right of way on the town of Narragansett's waterway rights to the corner of the dock by moving it back 5 feet? I think we're probably talking about 2 feet of variance by shortening that float, and that's it. CJ?
If you were to shorten it about 5 feet, your depth at the end of the float would be approximately 1.5 feet, and you'd be, I would say, another 2 feet away from the town right of way.
Okay, so 2 feet from the town right away. In your professional opinion,
2 more feet.
2 more feet. Okay. So 2 more feet away from the town right away, correct?
Correct, because you had 6.5, so I'd say you're about 8.5.
So it would be 8.5. And what is the width of that to the end pole that's on the town right away? So they are on the town right away with that end pole, which we're not even sure, it may be a little bit in the town right
Right, we didn't.
away because we did the survey and the survey never was done at that time. So how much room do we have between my proposed dock and the open way of the fairway there of the pole, of the existing 2 poles that are on there's 2 poles, I believe, on the right of way on the opposite side, which would be the western side.
Correct. So you're saying from the corner of the float as it's proposed now,
Correct.
it's about 50 feet.
50 feet. And your professional opinion is navigation in that area. I know that you have state launches where big boats go out, and I think the state launch is probably not the width of this or close to it. Which is right over the other side of the Great Island Bridge is the state launch that everybody uses in the whole state of Rhode Island. So this riparian right away into the water is probably larger than the state ramp. But in your opinion, as far as navigation, does that affect, I mean, by opening and those 3 poles move, do you see any problem the way it's proposed here?
Well, certainly having the poles removed opens up the area considerably as opposed to what we originally were dealing with when the poles were there. It's definitely better.
Right.
I have not been out there myself in the summer because I don't live there, but as far as getting a boat in and out, I don't see an issue getting a boat in and out from the public
Right.
right
Okay.
away.
And just to add for the record, so when we come out of the waterway, the deepest part of that channel, the access to go out to the waters, is right where the poles are located. So you have 18, I believe there's about 18 poles, maybe it's down to 15 or 16 now. So these poles are right where that deep water is. And another further, I want to bring for the record is now when that it's called the stringer. So when that boat's on a stringer, there's rope tied off to that stringer, and that boat on a windy day pushes out into the channel and goes back out. So being with those poles, the stringers on the town right of way, those boats swing in and out of the channel. So that's a concern of mine as well. If I have to we have the right as a property owner on the water to a residential dock meeting the CRMC requirements, but more importantly, we have this situation with these poles that we are trying to work around, and we don't even know if they're legally there. So we're trying to design a dock based upon keeping all the resident people happy, and I don't want to change that. I don't want to be the bad person here, but we have something that's not even conformed. It needs to be in the harbor management plan. This is not in the harbor management plan. Tracy Silva at CRMC has requested, probably she could tell better than I can, countless times, town of Narragansett, please correct this issue, put it in the town management plan. There's nothing in the town management harbor plan where it allows these poles to be. And here we are trying to work around and be the good people and design this dock based upon that restriction. So it's hard for us to design something when we don't know the outcome of what is going on with the stringers. I'm sorry to ramble. I'm a bad speaker, but I just want to speak on that behalf. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Any further questions, Mr. DeAngelis, for your client?
None.
Okay. Council members, does anyone have questions for Mr. Santa Barbara? Okay, I'd like to go back to Tracy Sylvia and ask you questions about these various options that have been proposed, and specifically, I'm talking about the Great Island Community Group, this proposal to create this 12-foot buffer back from the right-of-way and how that's achieved. And you heard that they are not prescribing anything. They said there's a number of ways you can achieve that. What are the ways that a increased buffer can be achieved? And have you looked at it?
Thanks, Madam Chair. In detail, no. In generalities, yes. One hesitation I had was that the town, as the direct abutter, their comments didn't necessarily match the group's comments for potential resolution. So to choose one over the other didn't seem timely at that point. Listening to Mr. Crook, Mr. Samarero's comments, and having spoken with them over the past couple of years, they are looking for a certain, they're calling it buffer, let's call it property line setback variance. They're looking for an increased property line setback to 12 feet. The town, and I wanted to actually rebut some of the earlier testimony as well, either now or in later, but the town's comments, and I specifically looked at the minutes of the previous meeting, Mike DeLuca actually commented on, it was more concerned with anything, a boat crossing over the right of way and how they could achieve it with various float sizes or float locations. He didn't have a number that the town was looking for as the owner of that affected right of way. I think any of the solutions proposed on any of the parties, as well as the current layout, would all work. And I'm not a boater, just based on consistency with previous dock reviews over the years. I have a couple concerns with, and I guess responses to some of the comments. With all respect to the Taylors, and I knew the late Mr. Taylor, right now, the proposal does not cross the property line extension to the Taylors. Moving it slightly east still would not, though it would require an increased setback, which they did not sign off on, but the council can grant, just like they can grant the town setback right now over the town's comments. I looked at the proposal to the east, if they shifted it at all, and there appears to be ample room to site a future dock on the Taylor property between the Santa Barbara's potential dock and the existing dock 2 lots down. So that, looking at carving the cove up as pieces of the pie, I still think you could technically fit 2 docks in that location, even if you shifted this slightly. One of my other concerns would be moving it inland slightly, we could support a water depth variance. The extent of the water depth variance would be what I would want to see details on. The right cramp requires 18 inches at the seaward end. Doesn't really address the inboard end, but we're looking at about 9-10 inches now with the current proposal, and anything going less than that on the inboard end, I probably couldn't support very well. So moving it inland would likely require shortening the float rather than shortening the entire facility. As far as float, which side of the dock, you know, to restrict it to, I don't have a preference. As far as what size vessel, and also which size of the dock, several council members as well as commenters tonight all brought up an issue of enforcement. I'm not quite sure how the harbor master or CRMC enforcement staff can easily handle enforcing some of these restrictions. Also, all of our dock assets have a requirement for post-construction certification by the designer. So that would go to address some of the commenters by the group as well, that there would be damage or disturbance during construction. I hope I answered your question. I think that covered most of my thoughts.
So what I'm struggling with right now is, one of the requirements of a variance is that you have to show that it's the minimum variance, that, you've explored your alternatives, that you haven't overreached. And I don't quite know how to measure that, whether or not it has been minimized, because there have been these proposals put forward. You've said I could support one or two or a mixture of them, that would then minimize the potential impact on the public access. But we don't have a specific plan in front of us to be able to compare with the application plan. So I feel like I'm in a position right now where I don't have enough information to judge that variance criterion. So just to confirm, there is no alternative plan to compare it. You say I could look at it, but we don't have it.
The applicant has not proposed a specific scenario of let's take this option, let's move it 5 feet shorter, let's move it 5 feet. There have been pieces of all of these scenarios in various plans presented by the various parties throughout. Okay. But this was the plan to be reviewed and acted upon to date.
Okay, Mr. Hudner.
Madam Chair, I want to make sure I understand the play here. The minimum variance requested is sort of in place now in the sense that it leaves, it respects the requirements of the Red Book, both for the right-of-way and for the Taylor property, subject to an agreement with the Taylors, and I guess by operation of the Red Book regulations towards the right-of-way. Is that a starting point?
Mm.
Are you asking me or Tracy?
Well, I'll ask anybody who can answer.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, I would concur.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Tracy. So this is a starting point. Anything else we do is getting close to the nature of a taking. And I want to second the sentiment that was made by Jerry Sahijian, that, I mean, we are here to interpret the Red Book regulations and not to re-regulate or legislate these things. This turns into sort of a mediation as to who wants what, who gets what. So I think that's a kind of a tricky area to get into. Anything that involves the Taylors, if that were to be the case, I don't see how we could ask them to agree to anything tonight, even consider anything. They don't know what a dock would look like if they wanted to put one in. If I were in their position, I'd say, I really want to know exactly what I'm agreeing to, what the longer term impact of it is. That's the only fair way to go about it. I was quite impressed, I might say, by the fact that the on the right of way, the association had 3 non-conforming outholes at least right in the middle of the right of way, and nobody ever did anything about it. Whether they didn't realize it or they didn't, I don't know. But that was a big plus for the association to get those taken out. And that was all, it seems to me, through the operation of this process with the staff and the applicant, that was discovered and rectified, not through the actions
of the association who are, keep telling us how concerned they are. But so how far do we want to go here beyond what the regulations today call for? I mean, do we want one more round, putting the parties together, see if they want to agree to something, and then come back and consider this, or draw a line on it tonight with something that leaves everybody, I mean, the applicant has already shortened his initial request and made certain things possible for everybody's benefit. And the Taylors contributed, and the association has had 3 offending outhauls removed through no instigation of their own. I mean, that's a big plus. So, I mean, how far do we want to go with this is my question, I think. Because the equity issues look a little different to me than I realized at the beginning of the conversation.
Right. I mean, from my perspective, like I said, and I won't beat a dead horse on this, but I just don't feel like I have enough information for me to conclude that one of the variance criterion has been met. Others might feel differently based on the evidence presented, but I feel that it's unclear whether or not this is the minimum variance necessary, because our expert staff has said you can do other things to, bring back that property line setback that she could support, that would infringe less on the public access point. So and maybe this is something we put back to the applicant to address, but I feel that it's unclear on that point.
Madam Chair, I think if you did the shortening of the dock, you don't meet the minimum draft requirement, so that's an additional variance requirement.
Right, where you go to 1.4.
Correct.
Right.
So
which would be support.
We're more minimal now in terms of variances needed than we would be if that were to be required. I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but I think.
Yeah, right. You would need 2 variances, right, at that point, I guess.
Yeah.
One on the water depth but your variance on the property line setback would be less extreme.
Yes.
Tracy?
Actually was pretty much going to comment what Mr. Hudner said, is essentially in my opinion, they've minimized the variances that they were able to work with. Other alterations would minimize some of the objectors' comments, but also increase some of the variances they're seeking from CRMC.
Yeah.
And right now, the current proposal is not in the right of way.
Right. So there was talk about impairment of the right of way or encroachment on the right of way. The town talked about that. And I asked, well, how do you define that? What does it mean to encroach? And Tracy, does it encroach?
In my opinion, no, we regulate the structure, not the actual vessel's layout over the property line.
Okay. So that's.
Madam Chair, may I speak?
Yes.
Madam Chair, based on the evidence and the testimony and the staff report, I move approval of the application as submitted.
Mr. Hudner?
I'd be pleased to second that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I'd like to just ask a question, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Gomez.
I concur with the motion, but, and we just don't have enough information on some of the proposed changes that Mr. was it Samario came up with. They sounded interesting, but it means going back and almost starting over again with a new set of scenarios. And this has been going on for a long time. But the only point going back through these resolutions is the restriction on the size of the vessel and location, east end, west end of the berthing. And it notes that the staff concurred with that. Would any other staff care to comment on why they concurred with us assigning a limit on the size of the vessel. And I've stated my own personal opinion that, 13 foot was definitely too small. And we heard testimony that up to 23 foot and a 9-foot beam, normal small boat would be 19 foot with an 8-foot beam. So the getting into this restriction on the size of the vessel would bother me a little bit, and I wouldn't even bring it up except staff concurred with it. That was one of the resolutions they thought that was a good idea, I guess. To restrict the size and the location, which side of the dock.
Okay, Tracy, if you can respond, and then we'll go to Ron. Go ahead.
Sure. To clarify, and I guess it was a poor word choice, I had no objection to any of those solutions necessarily. They were more to minimize objectors' comments and concerns. The experience I've had with council decisions previous years ago, when things like that started to get regulated, it did become an issue of enforcement at times. But there have been council decisions that have done these various restrictions.
Yeah, I agreed with Jerry, spoke up on the size restrictions and thought, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I thought he decided that it wasn't really part of the Red Book and we really didn't need to do that. But anyway, I just wanted to get your opinion on that. Why it was staff concurrence. Other than that, I would support the motion that's been made.
Mr. Gagnon?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I believe by removing the outhauls, that addressed one of the resolution options that Tracy presented, I think, in the third bullet. And with that, I think that opens up the area to use both sides of the dock. But I still think we should, I would be in favor of the restriction of the 13-foot size or small vessel, because there are still appear to be navigation and other conflicts out there that came through with the testimony. So my opinion would be to approve it as with the outhauls removed and the vessel size restriction, but no restriction on use of the dock.
Is that a proposed amendment to the?
I'm throwing it out there for discussion right now. That's
Okay.
kind
I
of
mean,
what my
I
feeling
can
was.
tell you can probably see where I was going with it, but I wouldn't support a motion to approve as is. It would have to have some restriction or change in it, because I don't think as it stands now, the variance criteria have been met. With those types of restrictions, I could be in support of a motion. So that's just kind of what I'm thinking of. I wouldn't support the current motion. If it were amended, I might support the motion.
Madam Chair, I move the question.
To amend it?
No, I move the question. I move that we have a vote
Okay.
on the motion.
Okay, any other comments?
Madam Chair, I could support the restrictions, but I think that 13 is just a very small boat. I mean, you get kayaks that are longer than that. And so I would definitely want to see a little bit bigger boat, 19 foot, maybe with an 8-foot beam. But it looks like Mr. Shahagan would like to call the vote.
But Mr. Gomez, as you indicated, Ms. Sylvia indicated in her report, it was tough to regulate that.
Absolutely.
Okay, and once again, my experience, we approved the dock in Narrow River 20 years ago. We put limitations. Now the boats draw less water and the engines are smaller. And then do we have the resources to go out there every year and check their boat? And then think about this. We're going to regulate the size of their boat. The picture that Mr. Sun showed, I think I counted 11 boats. So we're going to limit those boats. So the applicant has private property, in my opinion, meets the variance criteria. And then there are 11 boats in a right of way that's only 35 feet wide, spread across, I'm not an engineer, it looks like 150 feet, and they're not limited. So I think we have to make a decision.
Yeah, I noticed that in that picture, Joe.
I hope you support the motion.
Right away.
Madam Chair, could I ask one more question about the restrictions?
Yes, go ahead.
They seem to be sort of going together, limiting the size of the boat and limiting it to one side of the dock. Do we need to do both? Is it possible to not limit the size of the boat, but to only limit the use of the dock to the side that's away from the right of way? And does that help the situation at all? Because that seems like it's something easier to monitor and regulate rather than going out and constantly checking about the size of someone's boat.
And are you putting that out for discussion?
Right, I'm not sure, Tracy, is that something that would help if it was just limited to the use of the dock to the side that's near the tailors and away from the right of way?
It won't increase the setback. Well, actually, it won't increase the physical setback to the structure. It appears to me it would provide additional boating room and clearance and work more toward the town and objectors' goals.
I would support that amendment. That gives more room to the right of way also.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, I would like to see a restriction if the motion were amended.
I would concur with the idea of restricting it to the eastern side and eliminating the need to restrict the boat size. I think the environment will pretty much take care of the boat size.
Sure. All right, so are you proposing then an amendment to Mr. Sahajian's motion?
Yes, I'm proposing to amend it to limit the use of the dock to the, I don't know if it's east or west, but the side that's away from the right of way side.
So the applicant can't put an 8-foot pram on the other side?
Madam Chair, Ray
I
Coy.
missed some of that. What was the question?
So you're saying the applicant couldn't put, I don't know, a dinghy on the opposite side of the dock. Meanwhile, there's 11 boats spread over 150 feet on a 35-foot right of way that we don't restrict the size.
Madam Chair, Ray Coy to be recognized.
Yes, Mr. Koya.
Madam Chair, I would be in support of the motion as made. I'm familiar with the hearing that was held almost a year ago. My review of the record, all of the evidence that's come forth from the applicant, their attorney, their engineer, the specialists, even considering all of the opposition, I think this homeowner has done everything they can to minimize any impact and to put restrictions on it, I think is punishing them when they've cut the size, they've done what they can do. And to Jerry's point, obviously, just my opinion, I would not want to restrict the size of a boat, but also restrict them from putting something on the other side as small as a dinghy. And if we put a restriction on the ascent that they can't tie anything over there, if they've got the smallest of vessels over there, they could be held in violation, and I don't think that's fair to them. So I would support Mr. Sahajian's motion. I think Mr. Hudner and Mr. Gomez have summed it up well as well. So at this point, those are my comments, and I would support that motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Koya. Mr. Hudner.
Thank you, Mr. Koya. I agree with what you're saying. I would support the motion, but I would also say, I think that if you start to restrict the use of the western side of the float or the dock, I mean, it almost constitutes a taking of property that I don't understand why we're getting into that.
Well, I mean, I think variance is an extraordinary relief. They're not entitled to it. They have a burden to prove that they meet certain criteria, and they have to minimize their impacts on the public access, on conflicting uses. And so it's not a taking, it's really just seeing if they measure up to these criteria for this extraordinary relief. And I think it would be appropriate to place a restriction, and it wouldn't be a taking because it would then show that they were doing the minimum, outside of what we would normally require as a standard. So they're trying to minimize that impact. They're not entitled to it.
Yeah,
Madam Chair, you suggesting the size of the boat, a restriction on the size of the boat?
No.
No.
But if we amended it to just motorized vessels on the side, on the east side, and any kayaking or anything that's not motorized anywhere. You can't regulate that anyway.
And Madam Chair,
Mr. Gomez?
just going back through my notes, I noted that I think it was Mr. Willis that stated that this would have been an administrative, taken care of administratively, except for Narragansett's failed to agree to the plan. So I think that has some bearing too. I think staff feels that what has been proposed is reasonable, and we're here because of the town objecting. So I think I'm agreeing that I don't like the restrictions either. So I just wanted to comment that it would have been administrative except for the staff, except for the failure for the town to agree to the plan.
Okay, any other comments? I think we're
I think, is it possible?
Miss Montanaro.
I would just like to bring to just the attention to the fact that there were 3 outhalls there that were not permitted. And there didn't seem to be such a problem or concern of the neighbors or of the town. So that in itself, kind of, in my opinion, negates the size in the just the problem that seems to be arising with this new dock in the boat. There are enough boats there already, and it didn't seem to be a problem. 11 boats that we saw in the picture. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention that I think that limiting is overreach on our part. I think that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Montanaro. Okay, so I think we have a pending vote, a motion to approve the application as presented with no restrictions. I just say for the record that I was absent at the first meeting on this, but I did read the transcript, so I can vote on this. But we have a motion, a second. We've had discussion. Are there any additional comments before I take a roll call? Okay. All right, Vice Chair Ray Koya.
Koya votes aye.
Don Gomez.
Gomez votes aye.
Mike Hudner.
Hudner, aye.
Jerry Sahajian.
Aye.
Patricia Reynolds.
Reynolds votes aye.
Ron Gagnon.
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Joy Montanaro.
Joy Montanaro votes aye.
And myself, Jennifer Cervenka, I vote no. So the motion to approve as presented is granted. The application is approved. Thank you, everyone, for their comments. All right, we have,
Excuse me, we've been
Yes.
going for 3 hours. Is it possible to take a 5-minute break or a few minutes?
yeah, are your
I
hands?
know, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, why don't we take a
Just a few
5-minute
minutes.
break? Is 5 minutes enough? We don't have
Yes.
much to do when we come back.
Yes.
Okay, all right, let's come back at 9, let's say 9:17.
Jim Boyd, could you give me a call? It's John Longo, 378-4441.
Last 4 digits, John?
4441.
So I'm just waiting for Patricia Reynolds, just turn on her video. Thank you. And then it looks like we lost Jerry. Does anyone know if he's coming back? John, we can proceed without him, correct? We haven't.
Yes, you still have a quorum.
Yeah, okay. All right, so going back on the record at 9:19. And the last item on our agenda, it's public hearing on proposed rulemaking management procedures. Mr. Boyd, you've been sitting patiently for 3 hours. Now is your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be very brief. And I just want to clarify for the council that what we have before the council's consideration tonight is adoption of proposed management procedure amendments identified at 650-RICR-10-00-1. These amendments were duly noticed by means of a public notice for rulemaking issued on November 20th, 2020, announcing a public hearing and a 30-day public comment period. The council held a public hearing on December the 8th, 2020, and no public comments were offered at the hearing. In addition, no written comments were submitted during the 30-day public notice period that ended on December the 21st. The proposed amendments will reduce the application fee for small-scale, low-cost projects and provide application fee waivers for qualifying federally funded Army Corps projects. In addition, the amendments include technical corrections to existing text and citations and a recently identified technical correction at section 1.15B1 concerning access to public records, the public records officer. The technical correction will indicate that Lisa Turner, CRMC office manager, is the currently assigned public records officer. With that, staff recommends council approval of the proposed management procedure amendments as publicly noticed to include the provided technical corrections. And with that, Madam Chair, I will conclude and be happy to answer any questions for the council in consideration of adoption of these amendments.
Thank you. I feel like through our subcommittee that we've been talking about this for a long time. So I know, we go through a process, but, I'm familiar with this. I don't have any questions. Are there other council members who have questions for Mr. Boyd on what's being proposed for adoption here tonight?
Will this require us to salute Lisa when we see her, since she's an officer now?
Genuflect.
That's right, genuflect,
Yes.
Neil, that's right.
And I might add that this technical correction is really to recognize the fact that Executive Director Willis appointed Ms. Turner the Public Records Officer about a year ago, but the text right now in the management procedures indicates that it's the Deputy Director, and at that time, Mr. Willis, who was the Public Records Officer. So we're just making a technical correction.
Sounds good. And we don't open this up again to public comment because we already went through that process, correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair, only if the council indicated that it wanted to hear additional public comments. However, you've already provided that opportunity. No one provided comments at the public hearing back on December the 8th. And as I indicated, we did not receive any written comments during the 30-day public comment period.
Thank you. I think I'm satisfied with that process. All right, well, I'll ask if someone would put forward a motion to adopt the proposed amendments as explained by Mr. Boyd.
So moved, Madam Chair. Don Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Can I have a second?
Koya seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Koya. Any discussion? Okay, I'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Ray Koya,
Koya votes aye.
Don Gomez,
Gomez, aye.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Reynolds, aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Joy Montanaro,
Montanaro, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. So adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. Tomorrow, I will file the amendments as approved by the council with the Office of Regulatory Reform as a post-adoption filing. And subsequently, we will file with the Secretary of State's office, and then they'll be effective 20 days after that filing with the Secretary of State.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your work on all these proposed amendments that you do and all the detail and follow through.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah, nice job.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. So I'll move for us to adjourn, and I don't think we need to do a roll call on that if just say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
Aye, see you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye
Good
now.
job,
night.
Glenn.
Bye.
Thanks.